It is Wednesday night, East Lansing, Michigan. Come on in, gather around, gather around, gather around. My name is Jim Comparoni, publisher, SpartanMag.com. It's been a long time. Great to be back with you. Great to have some people gathering in, filing in, getting ready to talk some Michigan State sports on a Wednesday night. Beautiful weather in the Midwest, beautiful weather in the state of Michigan. Gorgeous day in East Lansing, Michigan. Great to have you with us talking Michigan State sports. There's been a lot going on for the last 4 weeks. We talked about this in SpartanMag.com last night. I made a post about it. People have been wanting Spartan Plus to be posted, and I appreciate that. I appreciate that people have been yearning and thirsty and hungering for Michigan State sports talk. Took some time off for this and that and all kinds of other things. You don't care to hear about those things, but anyway, I appreciate that that you guys wanted to get back at it and talk some Michigan State sports. And a lot of things have been going on. April and May those months have been a lot busier than they've been in the past because of the transfer portal and because Michigan State with a first-year coach with a lot of roster movement and changes. And what we're going to do tonight is talk Michigan State sports. I don't think we'll have any guests tonight. Big Movie giving him the night off. We'll have him on again soon. We'll have Jason Killip on again soon to talk recruiting. Big recruiting weekends coming up the end of May and also mid-June. Jason Killip with a really good story about that over at SpartanMag.com. Go over to SpartanMag.com, become a subscriber. Check that stuff out. You'll like it if you're into recruiting and if you're interested in what's going on with Michigan State's roster as they move forward in the Jonathan Smith era. Certainly intriguing moves being made on a very pragmatic level, a very intelligent level. I mean, you'd expect that from any coach, but pragmatic is my favorite word right now. Step by step, brick by brick, 2 + 2 = 4, 2 + 2 = 4, over and over and over, things that make sense, which is very reminiscent of the way Mark D'Antonio built things in his opening months at Michigan State back in December of 2006, heading into 07. Yes, 06 and into 07. So, hey, give us a like at the channel here. Subscribe to the channel if you like this Michigan State sports talk. And go over to SpartanMag.com. $1. You can become a SpartanMag.com subscriber as we continue to evaluate the roster moves and evaluate who's on the roster and evaluate what happened in the spring showcase. 61 snaps that day. Been breaking that down. I won't have film of that tonight. Had our own video of that. We'll be doing that throughout the summer in terms of looking at some players and going over what we saw on that day. And it was an important day for us as media members, as interested observers of the program, because that's the only time we get to see those guys in pads really compete and scrimmage hard over a 9 or 10 month period. Last time we saw them was the Ford Field game against Penn State, and then there's 9 months without football. The spring game the year before, there's only like 30 plays of scrimmage that day, and it wasn't worthwhile at all in terms of trying to figure out what players were looking like and so forth. This year, like Jonathan Smith said after the scrimmage, that looked like real football, and we observers at Spartan Mag were able to get a closer look at some of the reserve players, get an idea of what's on the roster. But since then, more players have been added through the portal. Still getting a handle on those things. We'll talk about that tonight as we move forward. Go to SpartanMag.com, $1. Try it out for a month. You will like it. Over at SpartanMag.com, we've got something called the Underground Bunker Message Board, which is the church of what's happening now with Michigan State sport. It is the daily narrative for Michigan State sports. Over there, we talk Michigan State sports all the time. Post comments, arguments here and there. Break them up. Arguments, break them up. Everything's civil. Everybody gets along pretty well for the most part. Most of us are just out on recess having a good time. Some people have to have indoor recess if they misbehave, but that's good too. We love everybody. Almost everybody. And over at the Underground Bunker Message Board earlier today, I invited Michigan State fans to post questions that we would field here tonight on Spartan Mag Live. Got about 20 questions tonight. I don't know if we'll get through them all, but we will give it a try. In the meantime, post over in the comments area. We will take some questions over there as well. Let me check that real quick, make sure that everything looks like it's going well, and it looks like it is. So question number one and number two, it's coming from Roxy from Grand Haven. I don't know if Roxy's a he or a she. I'm assuming it's a she. Anyway, Roxy, she says, all right, this was actually question number 17, but I moved it to the top because it is timely. It's a timely question. She posted, the schedule news just dropped. What are my thoughts on the Friday home game against Purdue? And she says student section will be empty, sadly, and on national TV. Also, the game at Oregon will be a Friday night game. First of all, I'm glad I have not booked my flight for Oregon yet, because moving it from Saturday to Friday would mess up a lot of things. Secondly, I think Michigan State has a bye week the next week, so I think gives Michigan State followers a little more lag time. Last time Michigan State played at Oregon, I stayed an extra couple of days. Me and Konendijk did. We went fishing a little bit. Don't tell anybody. We might do that again, because there's no game the following week, and then the Friday thing gives us an extra day. Kid Fantastic, put that on your calendar. We're coming out to Bend, Oregon, probably on Saturday, the day after the game. So get your guide together. All right, so the Purdue thing, we talked about this. We gave our subscribers over at SpartanMag.com a heads up on this either yesterday or the day before. We had heard from sources in West Lafayette that the Michigan State-Purdue game was moving to Friday night. And I titled the post Unsavory Schedule Information. I wasn't real happy about it from Michigan State's fans' point of view. As a writer, no one cares what it does to us as writers, understandably, as media people. It's night games are not the greatest for anybody. Sometimes they're good or whatever, but I'm more concerned about the fans, and it's a Friday night in late November. It's going to be cold, and tailgating kind of dissipates as the season moves along anyway. And to think that when you add the cold weather to it, it's even less reason to tailgate. Michigan State's a great tailgating spot. People love to tailgate there. It's great tailgating. But as you get into home game number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, people kind of get that out of their system a little bit, and they're not quite as eager to tailgate. Some of you are hardy tailgaters. You'll be out there night game Friday, November anyway. But night games in November, first of all, are not great in the Midwest. Moving it to a Friday, it's less than not great. I don't like it. I'm not a ticket paying customer. You people are. So I guess I'm more interested in what you say about this. Michigan State has nothing to do with this. This is done by the television networks. They've got their pecking order of which games are the high-ranking games for each weekend, and X number of Friday night games were part of the Big Ten television schedule, the healthy, lucrative Big Ten television schedule that a lot of people were all excited about a couple of years ago, including, Big Ten football fans. That includes Michigan State fans. Hey, it's a great payday for Big Ten schools. It's going to help the athletic departments. It helps pay everybody. Well, it doesn't pay you. A lot of people were really excited. Hey, yeah, we're the Big Ten. We have a bigger contract than the SEC. See, we'll show you. We got a better contract than the SEC. What does that do for you? I don't know. The rank and file Michigan State fans, Big Ten football fans. What it means for you is there's Friday night games in November. That was the small print on this great television contract that fans were supposed to be all happy about. I don't like it. I don't like it for the fans. If you're a fan out there and you don't mind, go ahead and tell me I'm wrong. That's fine, and I'd reconsider. But I'm worried about fans. Issue after issue, topic after topic is making it harder and harder to be a fan. And this Friday night game in late November, I think it's terrible. Maybe I'm a curmudgeon. Maybe I'm yelling at the clouds. I don't know. But, Friday night for Labor Day weekend, I think is great. I think Michigan State has made that a nice tradition. I thought last year's game against Central Michigan was great. I thought it was probably the most festive home game of the year. Good weather, night game, all those things. Turns out it was soiled by the Connor Stallions thing that they're still looking into. Secondly, with that still in the balance, I thought that Central Michigan was a perfect opponent for Michigan State for the Labor Day Friday game. Every single year, maybe not, but those years in which Michigan State played Central Michigan on the Labor Day Friday game, I think it's natural. It's a natural. A lot of Central Michigan fans were on campus, talking and stuff. That's great. It provided a lot of color. Stadium was pretty much full. I thought it was the best home game atmosphere of the year. And everybody knows everything went off the cliff and down the toilet a couple weeks later. But that was a great night. But I don't know where Central Michigan fits on the schedule going forward based on what's going on with the Connor Stallions thing. So I don't know. No, I've not heard anything from anyone in the athletic department. We'll mention there's a question down here about that. And I'll just jump to that with this little thing that we learned this week. Graham Couch had a really good story. Lansing State Journal had an interview with Alan Haller and discussed some things during that interview, including it came up. Alan Haller said something like that he's intrigued and interested to see what's going to come of the Central Michigan investigation to all of that. And that's all that was said about it. Interesting that Alan Haller would say that he's interested and intrigued. I mean, of course he is, but I've not spoken with him about it directly, but intrigued and interested. It's interesting that came up at this juncture. So depending on what they find out, does that make Michigan State less likely to schedule Central Michigan in the future? I don't know. That would suck in terms of the spectacle that those Friday night games have become Labor Day weekend. I think Central's the best opponent for that. Western is good too, and Eastern here and there, and some others that they've played. I mean, Boise State was great the first or second year that they did it, but that was when Boise State was a top 20 program. I don't think Michigan State necessarily is going to have top 20 teams for that one in the future. And I know they're not having it on Labor Day Friday this year. I'll get to that in a second. But Central Michigan, it's not a powerhouse program, but if you're going to play them on that night. And I thought it was great. But if I'm Michigan State, I'm going to tell me what you guys think. If you're Michigan State and you find out that Central Michigan's football program knew that Stallions was there and he was a Michigan operative and it was helping Michigan prepare for the Michigan State game, if that happens, do you think that Michigan State should not schedule Central Michigan anymore, or until people that were involved over there are gone that had a hand in that? Let me know what you think about that. I think that that's a fair reaction, even if you lose a little bit of color and luster to that Friday night game some seasons. I don't know that Alan Haller would think that way. I wouldn't blame him if he did. Secondly, this year Michigan State with the opener against Florida Atlantic, it's going to be on a Saturday, and Haller said in that interview that that there's not going to be a game at Ford Field this year. He said that it was the best home gate that Michigan State has had for that game, that date, meaning Thanksgiving Saturday or Friday as it was last year. It's the best that Michigan State had since they played Ohio State in 2016. You might remember 2016 was a miserable season for Michigan State, but they had Ohio State. Or wait a minute, was it 16 or 18? I don't know. 16. They finished the season against Ohio State in 2016. And Michigan State played them tough that day because it's Ohio State. Had a lot of Ohio State fans traveling, and Michigan State fans came out for that one, even though it was a miserable season. But the Ford Field game is the most tickets Michigan State sold, or I don't know if it's the most tickets they've sold or the most people that passed through the turnstiles at a Michigan State game for the regular season home finale in Week 12. This was the most. Ford Field, even though the stadium is 12,000 seats fewer. So it was a success. We got questions about that coming up also. But this year, Michigan State's playing Rutgers in Week 12, home game. I think it's a great opportunity for Michigan State to play that game at Ford Field again. Initially, when Michigan State was playing Penn State at Ford Field, I wasn't sure how I felt about that. I was going to reserve judgment until I saw it. I understood why they were doing it, especially with Michigan State. It's been a challenge to fill the stadium in Week 12 in the past when that's a home game. Moving into Black Friday, night game is great. I mean, Michigan State was terrible, had a horrible season. That was the least competitive I've seen Michigan State on a football field maybe ever. But the event was great. Michigan State fans showed up. They were festive. A lot of Michigan State fans that, there's a lot of, and the type, a lot of Michigan State fans that live in the Detroit area that have gotten out of the habit of going to Michigan State games at Spartan Stadium. So when Michigan State comes to them at Ford Field, there's like a layer of Michigan State fans that are going to go to that game. And I saw some of them, you're some of them, and I've seen them. Some friends of mine, some friends of yours went to that game that wouldn't normally go to a game because it was in their backyard. I thought it was great outreach for Michigan State. Secondly, it's great because Black Friday, there's a lot of Michigan State people that live abroad throughout the country, and they come back to Michigan to visit family Thanksgiving weekend. You got Thanksgiving, they get back on Wednesday, they have Thanksgiving on Thursday. Then Friday, what are you going to do? Looking for something to do, people going shopping, whatever. Hey, Michigan State's playing at Ford Field. You want to go? Yeah, I got tickets, let's go. It's a natural for Michigan State fans that live throughout the country that are home for that holiday. It's great. The players liked it. They'd rather not play a night game week 12. They're playing indoors, NFL venue. They liked it. I thought it was a great idea by Alan Haller. But he said in that interview that that's not going to happen this year, which is too bad. I don't know if they floated that with the networks, if the networks were interested or not. But I think it would have been anytime Michigan State has a home game in week 12. I think he played at Ford Field. I think it's great. Tell me if I'm wrong. I could be wrong. That's my feeling on that. So anyway, so you asked about. I didn't know that the Oregon game was going to be a Friday. I do remember when they played out there in 2014, it was over 100 degrees at kickoff. So if it's going to be a night game, I guess you don't have to worry about that aspect of it as much. But Oregon is supposed to be really good this year. Going on the road there, it's a tough place to play. It doesn't matter if that's night game, day game, whatever. That's going to be a real hard one to win. Probably going to be a loss, and I'm sure a lot of Duck fans will be eager to welcome Jonathan Smith back to Oregon. But he beat Oregon a couple of times. He made it rough on them a few times. All right, so also Roxy in Grand Haven asks, this was a big topic and issue late last week and over the weekend about Jaden Mangum, the safety for Michigan State, went into the portal after the spring showcase, subsequently has committed to transfer to the University of Michigan. We talked about it on the board a little bit. I've had a few comments about it. And there was a slight controversy about an article in which our own Kenny Jordan was quoted. And Kenny and I talked about it, ironed it out. He ironed it out with the writers. No problem there. Everything's understood. Everything's fine. Kenny Jordan doing a real good job all around covering recruiting. Jake Laskawa doing a great job as usual. Jason Killip doing a great job with recruiting. Paul Konerdijk, great job. Across the board, look forward to having more and more from Konerdijk here in the days and weeks ahead. Turning him loose a little more, ramping it up. So anyway, Roxy in Grand Haven asks, without breaking confidence, can you talk a little bit more about the whole Jaden Mangum thing and how it all fell apart and why in the world would a Spartan ever defect to Michigan? She's asking this about me and about breaking confidence because I've known their father for a long time. He's a good friend. Went to high school with him. Played ball with him. It's been great to reconnect with him in recent years. So when all this happened, he kept me abreast of some things here lately. And I'm not going to go into get into all of it. I mean, might do something for a story later at some time, but I'm not sure Michigan State fans have an interest in it going forward that much. Plus, I need to ask him what part is on the record or whatever, and I'll let him see some things. But I don't want to do anything that would, you talk to someone as a friend, you don't know what he's comfortable putting out there and what's not. So you're asking, why did it fall apart? You're asking, how did the whole Jaden Mangum thing fall apart? Jaden Mangum was the older guy, the running back. Jaden is the safety. Started partly as a freshman, started all last year as a sophomore. Was honorable mention all Big Ten, I think? Yeah. Excellent player, put on some weight, looked even better this spring. Good Big Ten safety. So how did it fall apart? Basically, communication on roster decisions regarding the older brother, Jaron, and I'll leave it at that. But it came down to communication and when they learned what was going on. If that had gone in a different order, things might have been a little different, and some feelings were hurt and so forth. So, and then when he entered the portal, their father told me, he just said, hey, he owes it to himself. To see what's out there. So he saw what's out there. He entered the portal, and right away, Michigan, Ohio State, Nebraska, Alabama, and Georgia showed interest. Ohio State, serious interest. Michigan, serious interest. Nebraska, serious interest. Visited Nebraska. The entire defensive coaching staff came and visited him at one point. And in speaking with their father, Jesse Mangum, my read on it, he said it was very difficult to call Nebraska and tell him that they were going to go to Michigan instead. They were very impressed with Nebraska. Very impressed with Nebraska, the coaches, how they approached it, how they recruited him, and the setup at Nebraska and the facilities. Very impressed. I think, this is just me talking, reading between the lines. I think he would have selected Nebraska if the academic transfer situation would have been more seamless and easier. He told me that it's easier to transfer with Michigan back and forth. There's an in-state stipulation among university public schools in the state of Michigan to transfer from one to another. I was not aware of this. It's called the Michigan, I don't know what it's called. He told me what it was. I've not looked it up. But anyway, Jaden is going to be taking classes at Michigan State this summer, and they're going to be paying for them on their own. Online, I think they are. He's real close to graduating, 3.7 GPA, academic, all Big Ten. On schedule to graduate in 3 years this December. So it's really important to him and to them that he graduate from Michigan State. So they spoke with the Michigan academic people, and I think this was divulged in Ann Arbor a little bit, and a lot of it was true, that he'll take classes in Michigan State this summer, and then in the fall enrolls at Michigan, takes two or three electives, and then those electives will transfer back to Michigan State, and the plan is he will graduate from Michigan State in December. It was very important to them to graduate from Michigan State in December, and it was going to be more seamless to do it through the University of Michigan because of that state of Michigan transfer, whatever it's called, pact or agreement, whatever it is. It was going to be more difficult to do that through the University of Nebraska. If it had been that easy through the University of Nebraska, I think he would have ended up committing to Nebraska. It's just, I didn't ask him that point blank, but that's the idea that I got. But they're excited to be at Michigan. You're asking why would someone ever defect to Michigan? The in-state was a big part of it. The academics were a part of it. They're sensitive about people saying that they were chasing a bag or whatever. There was more money out there elsewhere than at Michigan. So it's not about chasing the biggest bag. It was the academic piece was a big part of it. And also the way, there's some plans about going to graduate school at Michigan the following year, and that I talked to him a little bit about that. Now, I won't say anything more about that, but they're really excited. And, he's a person, he's a human being. As people, I wish them the best, of course. People I've known for a long time. So I can understand why Michigan State fans were really taken aback by this. It's unprecedented. Hard to swallow for sure. And, he's got some support from some former teammates, especially on the position group. But I'm choosing my words carefully here. But I can understand why Michigan State fans feel strange about it. And then meanwhile, a Michigan player, Samaj Benjamin, transfers in. That's the way things are these days. So I don't think that's news. The things I just said, to some of it's not news to a lot of people, but it's certainly an interesting situation. But if communication had been better on some of the roster decisions involving the older brother, then this probably could have been avoided. Michigan State tried to smooth some things out, and they just moved on. So it was complicated. I personally, if I can just say editorial, just my own as a human being, I'm disappointed. Not that I'm just disappointed that I'm disappointed anytime relationships fall apart, right? And it's too bad. And there are some ill feelings, and that's too bad. I feel bad about that. I like we all like Disney endings, don't we? But not happening this time. Question number 2. Well, that was like question 17 and 1, but we'll just go back to the regular numbering now. Question number 2. Bilbo in the Shire. He says, when do you expect the Michigan State staff opening to be filled? And do you still think it will be Sadie Washington? Yes, I do think it'll be Sadie Washington. He was side by side with Tom Izzo at the EYBL tournament in Indianapolis last weekend, and also at one of the Adidas tournaments in Texas. Sadie Washington, longtime assistant coach at the University of Michigan, was hired originally by John Beilein, I think back in 2016 or so, and was retained by Juwan Howard. Sadie Washington, a Lansing native, longtime. He's been, even though he's coached and recruited for Michigan for years and years, Izzo always counted him as someone in the profession that he had a lot of respect for, and they were friendly, even though they're on rival rosters. Since he's not at Michigan anymore, he's available, and those two have, they've been on the recruiting trail together. I think Izzo, I know Michigan State recruited Sadie Washington when he was coming out of Lansing. And I remember Heathcote talking about it years and years and years ago that, and Sadie Washington ended up going to Western Michigan and was an excellent player there. I think he was on the team for Western Michigan that went to that won NCAA tournament and won one game. Might have even won two and went to the Sweet 16. I can't remember. It seems like they did something memorable or heroic. But Sadie Washington was a very good player at Western. And I remember Heathcote talking about it, that they looked at Sadie really closely, and they also looked at Ray Weathers, who was at Jackson High School at the time, and ended up with Ray Weathers. Ray Weathers did some good things at Michigan State, but it was close between those two. I mean, Sadie could have very easily ended up at Michigan State. So Izzo was on the staff back then. I've never asked Izzo about this, but I'm sure that Izzo was right in the middle of the recruitment and evaluation of Sadie Washington. So they go back a number of years. So now Sadie Washington's available, and I'd heard early on that he was under consideration. Izzo was looking forward to talking to 3 or 4 or 5 assistant coaches, taking his time going through a number of candidates and resumes, and he was looking forward to getting into it slowly and steadily, and that's what they've done. There's nothing official about this. The question is, do I expect Michigan State staff opening to be filled, and do I still think it'll be Sadie? Yes, I do. I posted that to the message board a couple days ago. There's some indications internally from some sources that it looks that way, but I've not heard that specifically from the Sadie Washington camp or from Tom Izzo himself, so I can't verify or confirm that this is happening. But you're asking me if I expect that. That is what I'm expecting. Sadie Washington was a tough wing guard at Western Michigan. As a coach, he's been involved in coaching big men, and Michigan State needs that in terms of big man development. I'd have to ask some people more directly about the Michigan coaching staff and how things were allocated. But if you're to trust his Wikipedia page, Sadie Washington was responsible for coaching the big men there, including the development of Mo Wagner, who came in already with a lot of skill, DJ Wilson, and some others. I didn't know that about Sadie, that coaching big men is it's a high bullet point on his resume, but Michigan State needs that. So that's another reason why that one could be a good fit. So stay tuned on that one. Question 3 before we go over here and check the comments area. Ernie in Denver, he says, hope you and the family are doing well. Thank you, Ernie. He says, are there any positions that the staff is currently still hunting for in the portal on football? Have you heard anything about guys who entered or transferred that are maybe regretting their decision? No, I've not heard about anybody that entered the portal that regrets it. A lot of the people that were in the portal, Michigan State doesn't come out and say this, but there were players that the current staff didn't see being in the 2 deep anytime soon. So you help those people, you help them find other schools, and you try to get other players to replace them. That's the way college football is these days. But I've not heard about anybody regretting it or looking to circle back. I'm trying to think, who is in the portal now that you mention it that is not committed anywhere. I've not heard anything about it, but, Michigan State's situation on the offensive line is thin. It's pretty thin there, losing players in the offensive line and not getting a lot back in the portal. You need walk-ons, and I wonder about the Hartman kid. What was his name? Andy Hartman. Looked solid in the spring game. He's a walk-on. I kind of thought he'd get scholarship interest maybe at the MAC level. I don't know if he's gotten that kind of interest. If you're Michigan State, I don't know anything about personalities and attitudes. I assume those are good. But I would take him back as a walk-on. Just at face value. I don't know good or bad in terms of how he fits as a person. But, hey, you need walk-on offensive lineman. If he didn't get what he's looking for in the portal, I'd take that guy back. As far as others that enter the portal, let's see. Guys like Davion Prim, I don't know if he ended up anywhere. Eddie Pleasant, Marquis Lowry, Jalen Berger. These are guys. I mean, Berger can play at this level, but they're moving on. I don't think Michigan State, even if those guys were not happy about being in the portal, I don't think Michigan State, if Jaden Mangum had decided to come back to Michigan State, they would have taken him. But these others, I don't think so. Andrew DePape, I'm not sure where he's ended up. Kari Crump, Sean Brown, Malcolm Jones, Jack Nickel, and Jalen Barber, and he was off the team before spring practice started. And that's pretty much all of those. But you're asking if I've heard of any of these guys or having second thoughts. I'm sure a lot of those guys would probably like to remain at Michigan State, but there wasn't room for them to, sadly, in the way college football is done these days. So, and I'm not blaming any coaches. I'm not hating the players. I'm hating the game a little bit on that. It's the way it is, and it's the way you have to move your roster, especially when you're a new coach, if you want to be competitive, because the fans expect competitiveness. Back just 7-8 years ago, D'Antonio was pretty forthright about it. He was like, if we recruit a guy and we miss on him as an evaluation, that's on us. He's still welcome here for 4 years. Now, that was okay back then when nobody else was doing this, but once teams started these meritocracies where you just cut players, then you'd better cut players or you're going to fall behind, sadly. So you're asking, have I heard about any guys that transferred that might be regretting their decision? No, I've not heard that. As for, you're asking if there's any other positions that the staff is currently still hunting in the portal. No, I hear from a very good source that Michigan State is done in the portal this time. By my numbers, Michigan State's at 84 scholarship players. I might be off by 1 or 2. I don't know if they keep one open in case something happens with, if some great player wants to transfer. Maybe they do keep one open for that. I don't know. But I've got them at 84. But very good source tells me that they are done. So let's go over here to the comments area. What do we got? Got Brad Fashenko checking in from Austin, Texas. Always great to hear from Brad. Brad's in here first. Thomas Kohlberg says, what's up, comp? Daniel Berry, Sports Highlights, says, good evening. Matt Laurich checking in from Bloomfield Hills. And Eric M. from Roswell, Georgia. That's our starting 5. Got Fashenko at the point. Thomas Kohlberg is the shooting wing. Daniel Berry, Sports Highlights. He's the other wing guard, but just by his name, Daniel Berry, Sports Highlights, you just know that he's going to be a little bit selfish. More of a flashy guy about his own game, not about the team. So we'll keep our eye on him, but he's earned a starting spot tonight. Matt Laurich down low, Eric M in the middle. We're going 2 bigs, Laurich and M. Great to have those guys starting lineup tonight. John Coonan, Sparty Jr. from Grand Rapids. Clark Merrier checking in from south of the border, Sylvania, Ohio. I think I met Clark at the stadium for the spring game a couple weeks ago. I meet a lot of people and I get them mixed up. I apologize, but I think I met him or his father. Good people. Number 6 says, put me in, coach. Sorry, number 6, you're on the bench, but you are the 6th man. 6th man. Squeaky wheel gets the grease, but you're not in the starting lineup. Number 6 says, one day I'll make the starting 5 and we'll win it all. I like his attitude. Kylan 45 checking in from Cleveland, Ohio. Says, go green. Thomas Kohlberg asking people to hit the like button. Appreciate the plug of support there. Lee Gauss is in the house. Great to hear from Lee Gauss. Lee keeps me, I think he's the guy that keeps me honest over there at SpartanMag.com, underground bunker. He tells me when I'm wrong. I appreciate that. O'Shagnessy, checking in from Dublin, Ohio. X Buckets for Life says, I'm here, comp. How's your afternoon and evening been today? Also, it's always great to hear from George Page, former guitar player and keyboard player for one of the top 25 East Lansing bands of all time. Of course, I'm talking about Surrender Dorothy. George Page, a virtuoso on the strings and the bones. It's great to hear from him. He says, hi, comp, checking in from Jackson, Michigan. The people checking in from Canada. Thanks, comp. How's the pitching staff this season? Talking about Michigan State's or at Okemos High School? Okemos High School is pretty solid. Brendan Walton, Colin Walton, Nick Grabornis. Doing a good job as always. Henry Cavalier. A lot of good kids. Got some tough games coming up. Tough one at McLean Stadium tomorrow night against a very good Williamston team. Diamond Classic. If Okemos is fortunate enough to win, possibly playing, semifinal game against Grand Ledge, but that's the same night as Okemos' graduation. Otherwise, there's going to be probably over 1,000 people there at that game. It's a great spectacle of high school sports, the Diamond Classic. It's great to be part of it. Williamston's very good. I've seen them play a couple times this year. Convey's good. The catcher, Kublik's good. That little left-hander, number 10, Palmer, excellent. He pitched Monday night. I think he's over the limit, so I don't think he's eligible to pitch on Thursday, but I saw him pitch against DeWitt also, a little lefty, 10th grader, Palmer. Williamston's good. Braden Johnson, second base, junior. Can lay down a bunt or drive it hard down the line on you. Got some pull power to him. And his dad's a magger. Williamston's good. It's going to be fun tomorrow. A lot of good players. A lot of good young kids playing some high school baseball, and that tournament's great. So thanks for asking. Salim says, "What's up, Jim?" Also, James Adamo says, "Finally, man, where you been?" I apologize. I've been coaching. I've been doing some stuff. It was Mother's Day and had some dance competitions. Not me, my daughter, and recitals and 2 funerals last week, and a bunch of other stuff. Matthew Johnson says, "Glad to have Spartan Mag Live back. Thanks for all you do, Comp." David Kopolka says, "Good to hear. Gather round." That's what we always say. Gather round, gather round, gather round. Good to see that we've got a pretty big crowd here tonight on a Wednesday night in East Lansing. Let's go back to the mailbag. Question 4. Bing Bong from Parts Unknown. He says, "Over under 4.5 wins for Michigan State, Jim, this year. What do you think?" "My mortgage depends on it," he says. Bing Bong from Parts Unknown. His mortgage depends on it. I don't advocate that. I think Michigan State was at 5.5 wins, and I was thinking more than that. And then Michigan State was hit by the portal, losing Mangum and a couple defensive tackles. And I backed off a whole game and a half on that. I'm not big on gambling. I don't advocate it. Be careful with that, people. Last year, this time, I thought Michigan State, all things going well, I thought they could have, if they would have had Keon Coleman and Peyton Thorne, I thought they could make a run at winning 8 games last year. As it turns out, they lost 2 guys, and I dropped that down to 6.5. As it turned out, Michigan State had a chance to win 6, let a couple get away. Had a horrible season, as everybody knows, where they end up 4-8, whatever it was. Peyton Thorne's back at Auburn again this year, by the way, with Hugh Freeze. As a side note, that's one coaching staff and one offensive outfit that I think will benefit from the new helmet communication. Coaches can talk directly to the coaches on the field rather than all the signs and all these things. Go straight into the earpiece. Last year, Hugh Freeze did not call the plays, and I think this year he is going to. And he's considered one of the better offensive architects in college football. We'll see what it looks like this year going forward. But the head coach will be talking straight into the ear there at Auburn. I think it's going to help Auburn. And we'll see what becomes of that whole thing. Peyton Thorne was certainly a lightning rod of attention and opinions at the SpartanMag.com Underground Bunker message board. I was always a pro Peyton Thorne type of guy, and I've taken some heat on that. It's okay. I might be wrong. I don't know, but I think, I thought Noah Kim had some ability, but once he got in there, he hadn't played in so long. There were some yips. I don't know if he would have ever gotten over the yips. I thought 2 or 3 years ago, I thought that Peyton Thorne was a guy that would end up at Old Dominion or, James Madison, a place like that. And I've been saying that for a long time. He's originally from Virginia. Ends up at Coastal Carolina, about the same type of thing. I think he could do well there if he settles down and shows some pocket poise. Not that anyone cares anymore, but my evaluation was I thought that he had a chance to do some things there. And I thought that he could be pretty good. And I thought that in some ways he looked maybe better than Peyton Thorne in the spring game 14 months ago. But that's different. That was only a few snaps. That's different than actual live bullets in the fall. They lost Peyton Thorne. Some people thought, that's no big deal. Michigan State's got other players, including Caden Hauser. Let the record show that losing Peyton Thorne was a loss, for sure. All right, so Bing Bong wants to know 4.5 wins, over, under. All right, open it up. Florida Atlantic, then at Maryland, then Prairie View, then at Boston College. Those 4. You're beating Florida Atlantic and Prairie View, right? At Maryland, it's going to be tough. Now, Maryland's got a new quarterback coming in, but that program has been pretty good. What, they win 8 games last year? Did Maryland beat Auburn last year in a bowl game? I'm embarrassed that I forget these things so quickly. And it's too bad that bowl games are harder to remember these days than they were in the past, because in a lot of ways, they don't mean as much. Yeah, they beat Auburn. Maryland beat Auburn last year in the Tennessee Bowl, 31-13. I'm not sure what happened in that game. December 30th. There's a lot of travel going on at that time. Some of those bowl games I never got a chance to watch. I'd like to go back and watch that one. But you're talking about a Maryland team that was 8-5 coming off a bowl win over Auburn. If you're a Michigan State fan, like a casual Michigan State fan, you look at the schedule and you're like, Maryland, they can beat Maryland. Dude, it's at Maryland. They won 8 games last year. They've been winning 7 or 8 somewhat regularly the last couple of years. I know they lost their quarterback, who's the all-time Big Ten leader in yards or something, passing. Snuck up on me on that one. So they got to replace the quarterback situation. But I've not really studied Maryland yet. But anyone who thinks, go to Maryland to beat them, no. At Boston College, lost their coach. Left to become, defensive coordinator for the Packers. Boston College was a bowl team last year. It's on the road. Not the most daunting place to play, but it'll be the bandana game there, which has been an emotional game for Boston College over the years. Almost beat Florida State last year, I think. Bandana game. I think that'll be the bandana game. That's based off a former Boston College athlete. I don't know if he was a football player or lacrosse player or athlete of some sort. During 9/11, there was the legend of someone wearing a red bandana, something like that, who kept going into the buildings and rescuing people, and then he didn't make it out. And there were people that remembered someone in a red bandana that kept going in. And they figured out later it was this gentleman. I wish I knew his name. But they dedicate the bandana game to him every year. And it's an emotional thing. And I suspect that they'll have the Michigan State game as the bandana game at Boston College this year. So, red letter game, to say the least, even though it's not a natural rivalry. But Boston College, I don't know what that roster looks like. I'll do some more research on them as we get closer to the season. But people that look at those first 4 and see 4 winnable games, not going to be that easy. Then you have the 4 in the middle. Ohio State at Oregon's a loss. Got Iowa at home. Michigan State had Iowa beat. Well, with all the terrible things going on at Michigan State last year, going into the Iowa game, had the Spartan Dogs for Life thing the rug pulled out on that. Some players basically saying they weren't sure if they're going to play or not. And I understand that. And Michigan State still had them beat, but let that game get away in a couple of punts, basically. Now, Cade McNamara did not play in that game. He was injured early in that game, right? And I'm not saying Cade McNamara is great, and the Iowa offense is still a problem. They got rid of Brian Ferentz's offensive coordinator, but this is Kirk Ferentz's offense. That offense has not changed much over the years. Regardless of who the offensive coordinators are, the look of that offense does not change much. And when they have a substandard quarterback in today's football, it looks even worse. And last year, they were the worst offense in the country. You have McNamara coming back, new offensive coordinator. Is that going to change a whole lot? I don't know. Let the record show Michigan State had Iowa beat last year. Let it get away because of a couple of punts. That Iowa team didn't have McNamara. Now you've got McNamara coming back. New coordinators. That changed some things? Yes. Michigan State's roster received an overhaul. Iowa's defense is going to be good. This is at Spartan Stadium. I don't chalk that up as a definite loss. I think Iowa could go and win a lot of games like they normally do with that. It seems like they have schedule breaks. They could win 9, 10, 11 also again, but they won 9 or 10 or 11 last year. Should have lost to Michigan State when Michigan State was having one of the worst seasons in program history. So we don't know what Iowa is going to look like in late October. We don't know what Michigan State's going to look like in late October. But it's fun to sit here and speculate, right? We've not seen either team play. But I'm not ready to close the door on the possibility that Michigan State could beat Iowa in those middle 4 games. Before the roster upheaval, I wouldn't have closed the door on possibly making noise at Michigan either. Michigan will be good this year. The defensive line's going to be really good. Good tight end. All those things. They'll have enough culture carryover from what Harbaugh had because they had a lot of great chemistry, a lot of good team-oriented physicality on that team, and that'll carry over for a while. Whether or not it remains strong after 2 and 3 and 4 years, that's what Sharon Moore is going to set out to do, and we've seen it. We've seen other programs where it kind of bottoms out a little bit. Like, who was the guy that Miami Hurricanes that won a national title and then was gone within 2 or 3 years? Same thing with the guy that at Oregon that replaced Chip Kelly. Did all right for a little bit, played for a national title, and within 2 or 3 years he was gone. So Moore needs to prove that he can keep it rolling. So, but year 1, there will still be some residuals left over from the Harbaugh culture that it's going to still be strong. So that's going to be a real difficult one. So, all right, in the last 4 games, Indiana at home, at Illinois, Purdue at home, and Rutgers at home. 3 of the last 4 at home, if I'm reading that right. Yeah, you should, Indiana's got a new coach. You're playing them at home. Should be Indiana. I'm not saying, we don't know what these teams are going to look like in November, but beating Indiana does not seem outlandish. Beating Purdue, they've got their own problems. Doesn't seem outlandish. So if you can beat Florida Atlantic and Prairie View, Indiana, and Purdue, that's 4 wins, if my math is correct. At Illinois, is that program, Bielema had that on the upswing? They teetered a little bit last year. I don't know. It's at Illinois. That could be one of those swing games. Rutgers at home is going to be more difficult. Rutgers is pretty good. And they've built a good defense there and a good run game. Quarterback has been a problem at Rutgers, but they're getting that thing improved a bit. That's going to be difficult. I'd prefer for that game to be played at Ford Field, but it's not going to happen. That's where we are. You can say, man, Rutgers, you should always beat Rutgers. Well, if you're saying that, you didn't watch college football closely last year. Rutgers was respectable. And that defense was good. And that run game was good. Michigan State could not stop the run in the 4th quarter of that game. Rutgers, they beat Miami in the Pinstripe Bowl last year. Who'd they lose to? They lost to Maryland, lost to Penn State, lost to Iowa 22-0. They lost their last 4 regular season games, lost to Ohio State. Michigan State was winning that game, but then couldn't stop the run in the 4th quarter and blew that big lead. Special teams, again, was a big problem. But Rutgers last year, 1-2-3, 3-1, 4-1, 4-2. They were 5-2, 6-2 at one point in the season. Not great, not a complete team, but they beat Miami in a bowl game, and they've got the defense, which is the first step toward consistency. By week 12, we don't know what Rutgers will look like by then. We don't know what Michigan State's looking like by then. If Michigan State's enjoying a pretty good season, maybe they'll be fired up to finish it out at home their senior day, and you get a win there. If you're Rutgers, I don't know. So FAU, Prairie View, Indiana, Purdue, 4 wins. Can you get those 4 wins, and then you only need 1 more, either against Rutgers or against Illinois or against Maryland or against Boston College, and you're at 4.5 wins. Again, we don't know what Michigan State's going to look like. We don't know what any of these teams are going to look like. But I'm just saying, it's not even on paper. I'm just talking in thin air right now because I've not really broken these teams down yet. I kind of want to go back and watch spring game a little bit, just get a little bit of an idea on some things. But 4.5, can you get a 5th win out of these? I think so. I think that's better than a 50% wager in my opinion. But I'm not a rambling gambler, man. I don't. It's not that I'm not going to say anything morally wrong with it. I'm just saying it's dangerous. So don't bet your mortgage on this, as the gentleman said a moment ago. Kirby, question number 5 from Sanford Lake, Michigan. Sanford Lake. Beautiful area outside of Midland. Sanford Lake was the lake that was drained because of that dam breach, that the flood that went into Midland like 2 or 3 years. It was COVID. It was 2020, right? That was 4 years ago. A good friend of mine has a cabin on Sanford Lake. Very sad to hear what happened there. Hopefully that thing is filling back up. Kirby, let me know how Sanford Lake's looking. Is that thing filling back up again? Or someone over in the comments area can tell me. Hope it is. Anyway, he says, based on your latest intelligence, he says, do you expect any further movement in our 13 scholarship basketball roster? Basketball roster. Any further scholarship movement? No. And there was a little bit of, there were some questions about, something that I said on a radio show last week about, let me see if I can find this other one. Not this one. There we go. Because I was on a radio show last week and I got a text like right before it went on the air that was saying something about roster situations, but I read it wrong and I mentioned something on the air that I shouldn't have. Because Tim Stout asked me specifically, is Michigan State's roster set? And if he would have asked me 15 minutes earlier, I would have said yes. But then I got this thing and I was like, something just came across my desk. I should have just put that aside and acted like I didn't see it. But I said something could be happening, and then people mentioned it on the message board, and then I didn't get to answering that for 2 days, and it took on a life of its own. My bad. I apologize. Anyway, no. It's my understanding from sources that the roster is set. They're going to stand pat with what they have. Zapala coming in as a transfer, big man from Longwood. Had good stats late in the season. And you look at his video, you look at his film. I've not seen any video of him on defense yet. I'll have to go back. I want to watch him in the Big South tournament and maybe some other games. But you watch him move, just when he sets a screen and moves. He's got some lateral movement, which will carry over to defense. He's got hands, scores with either hand. He's got some footwork. He's got some hands to receive a ball and touch to finish. He didn't play a lot of minutes. Therefore, his statistics were not that amplified. I heard from a source who knows someone close to the situation in Longwood, and he kind of battled some endurance problems. So Michigan State's going to work on that and expect to get more playing time from him than he had at Longwood. On a per minute basis, he was productive. And someone with real close knowledge of the situation said that if he would have played 25 minutes a game and had the same per minute production, he would have been $1 million guy in the portal this year. So is there a chance that Michigan State got a nice discount player there? Yes, there's a chance of that. Now, I've not seen him battle for post position defensively yet, so I don't know his whole game. But they took a close look at him, and they had some connections and made it happen. So it's my understanding that's it. They're standing pat with a roster as is, to answer your question. Question number 6, Sparty on 91 from Alpena, Michigan says, Jim, have you heard? By the way, he's not actually from Alpena, but he didn't say where he's from in the post. And if you don't say where you're from, I'm just going to assign a town to you, like Ernie Harwell might do. So Sparty on 91 is his name, from Alpena, Michigan. He says, have you heard any kind of rumblings in regards to this Connor Stallions Central Michigan sign gate situation? He says, I've seen some people saying the Stallions Central Michigan incident is going to be ramping up a little bit. I also read that come August, there will be more chatter about Signgate. Just curious if you have heard anything through your sources about how the investigation is progressing. Good question. You say in August there's going to be more chatter about Signgate. I've not heard that. You would hope so if there's a football god, but I don't think, I've not heard that. I don't know. I don't know what more. They'll come down with something, but and I would imagine it would be August before the next season starts. Maybe. I don't know. NCAA's got their hands full with other things right now. But I've not heard anything about the Central Michigan incident ramping up, other than the comments, like I said earlier, about Alan Haller saying that he's intrigued to see what the investigation says. And I'd go back to what Rick Neuheisel said 2 days after this all started to mushroom a little bit. He says, what do you need an investigation for? All you need to do is get the football staff in one room and the athletic director say, who Was this guy on our list? Where's our list of guests on the sideline? Was he one of them? If so, why? Like Neuheisel said, it would take a very short period of time to get to the bottom of that, not 6 months. The fact that it's taken 6 months, I can see where Alan Haller is a little bit irritated by some things, but I don't know where it's going to go from there. But like I said earlier, if you're Michigan State, in terms of scheduling Central in the future, could that make things a little bit sour? I think it could. I've not heard that from Michigan State people, but wouldn't doubt it. Again, over in the comments area, let me know what you think. Should Michigan State consider dropping Central Michigan as a visitor in all sports in years to come, unless there's changes made there? I don't know. You guys answer that. I'm just throwing it out there as a question. And that one hurts too, because I've got some friends over there at Central in the athletic department. So, but that I'm just here calling balls and strikes, trying to anyway. Question 7, MSU Pat from Munising, Michigan. He's not actually from Munising, but I've loved Munising. Lovely town on the Lake Superior shore, up there by Pictured Rocks. MSU Pat says, now that most of the dust has settled with the Michigan State football roster, what's your evaluation of the roster on defense and offense versus where it began after the last Penn State game in November? That's a big question. I mean, I could do like 10 pages on that subject in the old Spartan magazine. Let's see here. Let's go with this one. You're talking about since the Penn State game. At the Penn State game, there were 73 players who dressed. Michigan State only went with 73 players for that game. 57 scholarship players dressed for that game. 7 were outgoing seniors. And there were 8 who left the portal afterwards. And that's not counting Noah Kim or Sam Levitt or Blackstock. They were not with the team at that point. As of December 1st, according to my count, there were only 38 scholarship players who dressed for the Penn State game that were still on the team at that time, plus Dylan Tatum, Amarion Smith, and Jalen Berger, who were not there that day. So I had 41 scholarship players, 38 who dressed against Penn State. So Michigan State added 10 from the winter portal. They added 13 from the spring portal, so that's 23 players from the portal, plus 18 true freshmen. That's 41 new scholarship players. That's a lot of new players. But, last year, when all this started, I made note that Nebraska had 42 new players when they had their coaching change last year. From one year to the next, 42 new scholarship players. Michigan State right now is at 41. So these are not unprecedented numbers. In terms of outgoing players in the winter, Michigan State lost 15 transfers, then 15 scholarship transfers. That includes Hank Pepper, who was a long snapper who left after 4 games to retain the redshirt ability. In the spring, Michigan State lost 19 scholarship players. That includes Jalen Barberin, who pretty much was off the team before spring practice started. And that includes Nateote, who just was on a milk carton. He was gone. I'm not sure these coaches ever knew who he was, but that includes him as a scholarship guy. So 15 transfers go out in the winter, 19 went out in the spring, so that's a total of 34. Then you have 11 graduated seniors, so 34 plus 11 is 45. As of May 9th, that's the number that I have in terms of scholarship players that are gone. So 45 are out, 42 are in. So you're talking about a major overhaul, half the roster. So where are they better? Matt Dorsey, our longtime recruiting analyst, who drops a lot of great knowledge on the message board, Underground Bunker message board from time to time, known as Dorsicles the Wise, dubbed that moniker by Brez Prez. We love Matt Dorsey. He had a great post a couple days ago saying, he went over every position group on the offense with his observation and his opinion on whether Michigan State was better or worse than they were last year. And I didn't disagree with much of what he said. So you're asking, since the Penn State game, your exact question was, what is your evaluation of the roster on offense and defense from where it began and where it was after the Penn State game? Well, after the Penn State game, we had heard that Oregon State was going to be, that Jonathan Smith was coming in from Oregon State. We heard that Aiden Childs was going to come with him. That didn't happen for another couple of weeks, but not a bad situation. You keep Nathan Carter, bless his heart. He said after the Penn State game, he loves Michigan State. He's interested in staying. By the way, the term bless his heart, that's something I've been saying over the years. And when I say bless his heart, I mean bless his heart. There's a lot of people out there that say in the South that if someone says bless your heart, they're actually saying F you. Not the way I was raised. My mom was Southern, my dad was Southern, all my aunts are Southern. And when they said bless your heart, they meant bless your heart. And when I say bless your heart, I mean bless your heart. So I don't know if there's some new convoluted definition of it with younger people. I don't know. Younger aunts. I don't know. I know that's a Southern saying. But this notion that it actually means F you, not the way I was raised, not where I come from. Nathan Carter, bless his heart. So he's back. K'Ron Adams coming in from UMass, 1,000-yard rusher. Looks pretty good. I mean, you're losing Berger. They're excited about Adams. They're excited. Brandon Tullis looked pretty good in the spring game. Running back situation, I think it takes a step forward. You have Carter back plus Adams, Tullis. You have Frazier coming in. I'll go with that. Tight end's going to look better. You lose Carr. Malik Carr had some talent, but he was high maintenance. He lasted about, I think he said this. I think he posted on social media that he had a meeting with the coaching staff and some of the assistant coaches, and within 20 minutes, they suggested he find a new home. So where'd he end up? Memphis or something like that? A lot of talent, and I hope he gets it squared away at some point, but it was hard to depend on things. Hard to depend on in blocking, running the right route, and he's just kind of difficult. I wish him well. Jack Velling coming in. Velling looked okay in the spring game. I kind of expected a little more in the spring game. It's just a spring game, but he's got his hands. The hands are good. Blocking-wise, he was okay that day, but he's second-team All-Pac-12. He's going to be good. Parachek, did not see him in the spring. He was hurt. Last year's a true freshman, did some good things. Michael Masunas, they were pretty pleased with, a guy that's never been on the field. They were pleased with him. Overall, I think tight end is better. I agree with Matt about that. So, wide receiver, you lose some players. Terrell Henry had some ability. Fitzpatrick was here and there, whatever. But they didn't really go out and get anybody in the portal at that position. They had the one kid, what's his name, Shenafield or something, TJ Shenafield, something from Purdue, over 100 career receptions, but that one got sideways with transcripts and so forth. Didn't end up getting him. And Michigan State looked in the portal for wide receivers, according to sources. Michigan State was interested in the portal, interested in wide receivers, and although there's 1,000 players in the portal, when they looked at wide receivers, there was really, from what I hear from a good source, there was really nobody that really flew their kite. And those that were pretty good, the prices were just crazy. Prices were one thing in the winter, and then the spring, the same level of player at different positions, the prices were higher. And Michigan State's trying to establish low ego, high output. It's hard to establish low ego if you're overpaying somebody who's going to come in and be a second-string wide receiver, and suddenly he's making more money than 90% of the players on your offensive roster. So there's cultural decisions in play as well as they plant the seeds and the foundation for the program the way they want it to be. So wide receiver, you have Montel Ray Foster back, Jerron Glover back. Antonio Gates went into the portal, came out, kind of hoping that it remains that way. Alante Brown struggled last year coming in from Nebraska. Had a good spring, according to coaches and teammates. The most improved player maybe on the offense, one of the more improved players on the team. We didn't really see that in the spring showcase, but I'm taking that at face value. You have Nick Marsh coming in as a true freshman who made a splash in the spring game. He has plus ability. So you got those guys. In terms of what they had coming out of the Penn State game, that's not changed a whole lot. You lose Terrell Henry, but that group of wide receivers is similar. It's a lot of the same guys, so it should be better, I'd imagine. So I think coming out of the Penn State game, I think you're better at tight end, better at running back, better quarterback, better wide receiver. The problem, of course, is on the offensive line. And you lost some some people that have been functional players over the years. Maybe not standouts on the offensive line, but it's not been a position of strength for going on 2 or 3, 4 years, and trying to get something established with some of these guys. It's been difficult. Then you lose Vandemark the last minute of the spring. That was a surprise to the coaching staff, and he was a good, solid, functional right guard. And I heard that he wasn't, he was torn about leaving. He's going with Kapilovic, his former coach, who's at Alabama now. Not a great thing for Michigan State. Michigan State looked around to the portal to try to get some replacements there. Didn't quite find the right guy, and they shut it down. You got Luke Newman coming in. I think they played Boston College last year. Holy Cross played somebody Division I. I've forgotten already, but I need to go try to watch that game. I watched them against somebody, and I looked at the defensive ends they were going against, and they were, MAC level defensive ends. I thought Newman looked pretty good. I think that he looks like he could play. I'm not surprised that they recruited him. Brother Rice guy, in-state guy, coming back to the state of Michigan. I think that he's got to learn the system and learn everybody and have the chemistry, and assuming he's healthy and everything. I would think that he played left tackle at Holy Cross. I think I think he could be a good right guard with Vandemark moving on. If not, compete with Baldwin for left tackle. But so you lose Spencer Brown, who was not great, but he was proven, functional. Oklahoma paid too much for him. I question their evaluation. So, nothing against Spencer Brown, but for what Oklahoma was paying, you got to let him go as you build your program. Now, down the road, if you've got a really good team and you think you've got a good chance to make a run, 2 or 3 years at more wins than this, and down the road make a run at 9, 10, 11 wins theoretically, at that point you should have your NIL situation in order, which they're still working on. And at that point, you put your heels on the ground, I would think, and you protect assets like a starting right tackle or starting defensive tackles. And you no longer become a team that gets poached with regularity. There'll be some players here and there that you lose. Michigan lost, a defensive back to Alabama or something. Yeah, everybody's going to lose players here and there. But you don't want to be every year losing assets at defensive tackle and other positions. I think Michigan State will get to the point where they can play portal defense. They're not going to spend with everybody. There's going to be some teams out there that throw Steinbrenner money around. There's going to be teams that the highest paid roster in the country is not necessarily going to be the best team in the country. We've seen that in baseball over the years, that the highest paid free agents teams and the teams with the highest payrolls don't always win. I think that's going to happen in college football too. So, in terms of the whole roster, they lost Wigginton, who was lost him to Illinois. He was a depth piece, part-time starter. Vandemark hurt, and Michigan State lost some decent players. Spencer Brown played a little bit. Started for a few years. Ethan Boyd was the presumptive starter at right tackle after Spencer Brown left, and then Boyd never played in spring practice this year. Was battling some situations, ended up transferred to Colorado. Basically, reminds me of Theo Lacusa a little bit. Theo Lacusa was a 4-star guy that came to Michigan State, had a lot of ability, and after a year or so, just wasn't sure he wanted to play. He just wasn't sure he was a football player. Transferred to some JUCO, gave basketball a try, then he tried football again, and I'm not sure we've heard from him again. That's what Ethan Boyd reminds me of a little bit. He's got some ability. He has good ability, good frame, but that was a tough one for Michigan State, because when you're inheriting a roster, you lose Spencer Brown. Okay, we got this kid Ethan Boyd. He's actually more talented. Let's plug him in. But it never got to that point because there are just some situations there. I don't want to get too personal about things. There's, he's a young man and some things need to remain private and so forth. But so you have Ashton Lepo stepping in there. And Ashton Lepo in the spring showcase, going against Dunnigan a little bit, going against Jalen Thompson a little bit. Lepo, he kind of looks a little awkward, but he kind of got the job done. I don't know if he can get the job done, play after play after play against the opponents Michigan State's going to see. Doesn't, he moves a little bit awkwardly, but we're still learning about him. But with Spencer Brown leaving and Ethan Boyd leaving, Lepo needed to step up, and he wasn't bad. He's looking like a first-string right tackle. I mean, we need to see more. I'm not lead pipe cinching that he's ready to be a guy that's going to gain traction and be a plus player, but by and large, offensive line, it's a loss. You're asking where things are compared to Penn State. You lost some players there. And it's a position that was already kind of weak, right? I mean, Brandon Baldwin, I think, went in the portal and came back. Saw Gavin Brocious for the first time in his career. He injured his knee last year. Actually, it was in the spring of 2023. Saw him in the spring game, and he had some force to him. Christian Phillips at left guard has some force to him. So I think that's a healthy competition, Phillips and Brocious. Am I sure that someone there at left guard is going to be a plus player? No. But I think those two guys. Now there's not a lot of great depth there, but I think Michigan State can possibly get a decent left guard out of Phillips. We'll talk more about that as the summer goes along. We can talk about the defense as well. But long story short, how do I feel about it? Well, when the coaching change happened, I said, when you look at Nebraska, 42 new players, this could happen at Michigan State. They could lose a ton of players, and they did piecemeal. Kind of. It wasn't like everybody all at once. They retained a good number of players, brought them back from spring practice and winter conditioning, learned more about those guys, went through spring practice, and then they were ready to let another 10 or 12 go after they learned more about them. The roster as it stands right now, going out and getting Ben Roberts from Oregon, Taquan Dowse coming in from Georgia Tech, I think looks, 20 starts at Georgia Tech, looked pretty good in the spring scrimmage. He's a good, solid, functional, starting level type of player. Ben Roberts, same thing. Of course, you have Maverick Hansen coming back. Jalen Satchel coming in from Old Dominion. I've not watched him yet. Ruquan Buckley from Nebraska. He's just kind of a body. I don't mean that disrespectfully, but he's just a guy, and you need some guys at that position. Last year Michigan State all of a sudden ran out of guys. Had to move Ken Talley to defensive tackle. Had to move Ben Nelson from walk-on offensive line to defensive tackle. You need bodies. So Ruquan Buckley, maybe he'll prove to be better than that, but he's a body, and you need guys like that. Alex Van Sumeren, we see him around a lot. He's still in it. He's still working, and that's an X factor. It's a 4-star recruit that came in and played 4 games as a true freshman 2 years ago, shut it down to retain his red shirt. Then last year was injured in spring practice or in preseason camp, missed the whole year. So not sure what he's going to look like. It's hard to rely on him because I'm not sure what he looks like. Is there a chance that now he's 2 years older and he'll get in there and he'll be functional plus at defensive tackle? Yeah, there's a chance of that. That'd be nice. But that's an X factor. But you can't really depend on that, I don't think, if you're putting a roster together. That's why you go out and you get Roberts, Buckley, and Satchel, and Dowse. So Hansen and Dowse, good chance they'll start. And Roberts, I think he could possibly start. Those 3 are going to be solid. Now, who's the 4th one? Could be Buckley, could be Satchel, could be Van Sumeren. I think it could be functional in there. And I'd heard that Michigan State's coaches were pleasantly surprised with Michigan State's defensive front 7 that they inherited. It was better than they anticipated. But then you lose Harmon, then you lose Simeon Barrow, and it kind of fractures it. Then you lose a safety back there, and it kind of throws it back in the Yahtzee can. But Jalen Thompson's back. Quindarius Dunnigan, defensive end. He's got some force to him. He's got some slipperiness to him. I think he can be a good, solid plus defensive end. Anthony Jones from Indiana, I've not watched him yet. Tyler Gillison from Cincinnati, I've not watched him yet. Chris Bogle, the spring showcase, was just kind of, he's just kind of still Chris Bogle. He's experienced. His first year at Michigan State, I thought he was firm against the run. Seems to me like he's got pretty good takeoff, and then when you get your hands on him, it kind of stops him. He's not able to continue to go forward. I mean, I hope he proves me wrong. But he's a veteran guy, can play the run a little bit. But you're looking for Jalen Thompson, Quindarius Dunnigan, I think, to be the standout defensive ends. I know Bogle's still there at rush end, second string rush end. He can come in and give you some snaps. Better than Anthony Jones. There'll be a competition there. We'll see. Jordan Hall. Jordan Hall looked fast in the spring game. Now, as a high school junior, when he was a 4-star, I was like, well, his speed is just kind of okay, which is the same thing I said about Nate Ote when he was a 4-star. I'm like, his speed is just kind of okay. Just like I used to say about Shane, what's his name from Cincinnati Moeller. He was a 4-star. I'm like, his speed is just kind of okay, and he never really started at Michigan State. Nate Ote, speed was okay. His speed was a little better as a senior film. Never started at Michigan State. Jordan Hall, his speed as a junior was just kind of okay, but his speed as a senior in high school is a little bit better than last year. He's on the field a lot as a true freshman, learning as he goes. You know, sometimes you might not play real fast when you're a true freshman out there. And then you continue to work on your body and so forth. There were a couple times in the spring showcase when he turned and ran. I'm like, hey, that's some pretty good speed right there. It's the first time I've said that about Hall. You know, he's a good leader. He's physical. He knows the game. He's a team-oriented guy. That's all well and good. And that's enough to be a good inside linebacker. I'm seeing a little more speed out of him now, which is good for his player development. Still a freshman. I mean, he's a rising sophomore, but he's still in his first year on campus. Jordan Turner, 18 starts at Wisconsin. You got Bridgman coming in from Michigan. Halliday's back. Wayne Matthews, people were, internally, people thought that he was a good, solid guy at coming in from Old Dominion. So those inside linebackers, Hall, Turner, Halliday, Matthews, those four, plus Bridgman, plus Pulliam coming in from Miami. The guy, Marcellus Pulliam coming in from Miami. I've not watched film on him yet either. Talking to a guy that I know that covers Miami, says he would have been like a third-string guy for the Hurricanes. He's got a lot of, 6'3", 240? That's good size for an inside linebacker. I've not seen what it looks like yet. But Hall, Turner, Halliday, Matthews, that can function. And coming out of the Penn State game, Michigan State at the Penn State game, I was watching pregame, and I think Michigan State only had like 4 linebackers dressed that day. I could go back and look at it. I mean, was the Milliken kid from Grayling. Sam Edwards was around as a walk-on. And, I mean, they were out of linebackers. It was a scary situation. And when Harlan Barnett, some of those guys said they were just happy to field a team sometimes, dude, it was serious. I mean, there was a shortage. Is this on here? Let's see. I don't know if I can find it. Yeah, the linebackers, I can't remember exactly who they were. I mean, Jordan Hall was still around, and Halliday, of course, and Aaron Alexander, and Darius Snow. I don't know if Darius Snow was there or not, but it was basically just it was Halliday, Hall, and Aaron Alexander, and not much else. I mean, they were a tweak away from being in serious trouble at linebacker. To go from that in the Penn State game to where they are now, they're much better when you throw Turner in there, Matthews, to go along with Hall and Halliday. Just that extra layer. I was like, what are they going to do with the linebacker coming out of the Penn State game? I thought Michigan State might have a tough time keeping Hall, but he likes Michigan State and they love him. So that's better. The nickel situation, you have Gross there, Darius Snow. I don't know if Snow's going to be able to move real well. Angelo Gross. I don't know what's going on with nickel, if Gross is the long-term guy there or not, or what they might do there. Defensive backfield. Losing Mangum hurts, of course. Dylan Tatum wasn't there. He got hurt late in the year. You have Spencer coming back. The corner situation, you had Chance Rucker. You had Dylan Tatum last year as a corner until he got hurt. And you had Charles Brantley, no one knew what his future was at the Penn State game. He had been gone for 2 months. So at corner, you had Rucker. Long story short, the corner situation is better right now than it was at the coming out of the Penn State game, and with an unsure future, because you've got. Let's see. This is why I like to go over these things before the show starts, so that it's easier to pull these things up. This is the 2022 starters. Now I'm spending too much time looking for it. didn't have Brantley. All right, where is this? Here it is. Sorry that took so long. Yeah, Chance Rucker. Yeah, Chaz Kimbrough starting the last 3 games. Caleb Coley started a game against Nebraska after Tatum was hurt. You had Brantley, then Rucker. Kari Crump started against Nebraska after his suspension ended. But yeah, Chance Rucker is a true freshman, and Kimbrough out there starting the last 3 games at corner. So Kimbrough graduates. So you compare that after Tatum was hurt. I mean, the corner situation was dire. The linebacker situation was dire. It's better now than it was after the Penn State game. And it had to get better, but I had no idea what it was going to look like. And inside linebacker situation looks solid. Corner situation, Chance Rucker and Brantley's going to be in there competing. Ed Woods coming in from Arizona State. I'm not saying he's great, but he started last year at Arizona State, started, 12 or 13 games. You have Jeremiah Hughes coming in from LSU, played last year as a true freshman. LSU's defense last year was atrocious. That's cornerback U, so it's a good recruit, even though it's Brian Kelly era. Defense was terrible, got rid of the defensive coordinator. The secondary was especially bad. So coming from LSU doesn't mean you're good at this point at defensive backfield. But it's a guy with some ability. And legend Cavazos coming in from North Carolina. A guy that was a borderline program guy or borderline depth chart guy. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that this guy's great, but these are bodies. But you have Rucker, Brantley, and Woods. Those are the 3. Hughes is in there somewhere. Cavazos is in there somewhere. Caleb Coley's still around. So you got some competitors there. At safety, Dylan Tatum's moving over there now that Mangum's gone. He was already there, and those three were competing for 2 spots. Dylan is entrenched in there for sure with Malik Spencer. Armorion Smith is still in the picture, I hear, but we didn't see him this spring. Jalen Thompson, true freshman, was in there in the spring game, and he looked like a true freshman. He's got a lot of work to do, but he runs around. He looked like a 12th grader. No big deal. Nakai Martinez coming in. He started 13 games at Central Florida. That's an interesting one as a depth piece at safety. So all things considered, you knew that Michigan State was going to have a roster overhaul after limping to the finish with that skeleton roster that they had at Michigan State or for the Penn State game. Has it pieced together better than am I prepared to say it's better than I expected? Yeah, I would say that. I would say it's better than I expected. Even coming out of the spring game, would I have expected Michigan State to go get a defensive tackle that's the level of Ben Roberts, who I think is a good, solid, functional defensive tackle at a time when trying to find somebody to play that position is really hard? Just ask Brian Kelly. I think that's good that they got him. I think it's really good they got Daquan Dowse back in December. That was better than a lot of us realized. So your question is, now that the dust has settled, what is my evaluation of the roster on defense and offense compared to Penn State? You hope for an A+, right? But A+ is not going to happen. I think it's good, solid, foundational, did a good job. Now I've got to look more closely at these guys who came in from the transfer portal. I've got to watch some games and arrive at some more concrete opinions on things. But I think this 85 scholarship, 42 new guys. It's hard to form a team when you have that kind of changeover. But I think they got a chance to field a football team. They got a chance to field a football team. All right, question 8, Drewski from Indiana. He says, curious to see who the remaining non-conference basketball opponents are going to be. He says, I know the Champions Classic is Kansas, and at Maui we have 3 games. But outside of that, what other games are in the works of getting scheduled and with who? Well, I'll tell you right there, the Maui game, it's going to be 2 tough non-conference games, maybe 3, right? Plus Kansas. That's about it. Sorry to say. But this is one of the problems when you have 20 Big Ten games. 20-game Big Ten season. In the old days, there were 16 Big Ten games. That gives you 4 more games to work with. And Izzo was known to schedule anybody, anywhere, anytime, all that stuff or whatever, to an extent. But you're not going to schedule 12 difficult non-conference games. You're going to schedule 4 or 5. But when you've got 20 Big Ten games, you only have room for 10 non-conference games. And you just mentioned Kansas and 3 games in the Maui. So you got room for 10 games. There's 4 of them right there. Now you got 6 games left. and you got to try to get some wins. Last year, Michigan State, last couple of years, it gets a little touchy on getting enough wins to get in. Like last year, you had Baylor, Arizona, Duke in the Champions Classic, Butler in the Gavitt games. There's going to be, is Gavitt games, is that still going on? I assume it still is. So this year you got 3 in the Maui Invitational, plus Kansas, and plus 1 in the Gavitt games, whoever the Big East opponent's going to be. That might be it. One more would be, one more challenging non-conference game is ambitious. All right, let's look at last year. I think they had 31 games, 20 Big Ten games, and then you had Baylor, Arizona, Duke, Butler. Butler was kind of okay. Michigan State kind of got a little bit of a break in the Gavitt games. Rather than playing UConn, they got Butler. So that might have been smart play on Michigan State's side to get a little breather there, because it was tough, right? So that's 24 games right there. 20 Big Ten games plus those 4. So you had room for, 7 more games. And Michigan State did a really good job. It was difficult. It was a challenging schedule. And going into the game, Michigan State was pulling their hair out, saying, why did we schedule Indiana State? This team is good. Well, Michigan State won that game, and Indiana State lost their conference tournament, so they couldn't get in. They didn't get into the tournament. They didn't get into the tournament, but they were good enough to get in the tournament. They were good. That was a good team. Michigan State had to win that game, and they played well to beat a very good Indiana State team. And getting that win, Michigan State was gaming the system a little bit with the algorithms and everything, and the computer rankings. Kevin Pauga does a good job on that. Even though Izzo was ready to kill him, some of his coaches, friends in the coaching profession, and former coaches were like, Izzo, why are you playing Indiana State? Are you crazy? I think Seth Greenberg said that to Izzo. But they beat him. That's a big reason why Michigan State was safely in coming down the stretch when everybody thought they were on the bubble. They were safely in. James Madison lost to them. James Madison turned out to be a very good team. Oakland beat Oakland, and Campy was very angry. We've seen Michigan State beat Oakland 25 straight years or whatever it is. That's the most upset I've seen Campy, that his team didn't compete that day. And as we saw later on when they beat Kentucky in the NCAA tournament and they won their conference tournament, that was a good Oakland team. So I just mentioned 20 Big Ten games plus Baylor, Arizona, Duke, Butler, 24. That gives you 7 games, and you have to have a couple of decent ones to make your algorithms and your for the computer system. You need to beat some teams, some home games. So that's where Indiana, James Madison, Oakland come in. So that's 27 games right there, right? 20 plus those 7 is 27. You got room for 4 more games after that. So after those 4 and then 3, solid mid-majors that help your computer situation, you got room for 4. And at some point, you have to develop your roster. That's like last year, Izzo was frustrated that the schedule was so hard and there was no... And the way it happens that you have Big Ten games in early December, like you had to win those games, and they lost those 2 to Nebraska and Wisconsin right away. It puts them further behind the 8 ball. Then you didn't have it. You need those blowout games. My friend Tim Stout always complains about, why are they playing Elkhorn State? Why are they playing Southern Indiana? Well, to Tim, if you're going to have a game, it might as well be a game. And to him, a game means you don't know who's going to win. Well, no. I mean, you need 5 or 6 games on your schedule where you can get Xavier Booker some minutes last year, and you didn't have a lot of those, and it took him a long time. Or Cohen Carr, you'd have liked to have given him minutes in more of those cupcake games early in the year. That's what those are for. They're like dress rehearsals almost. I'm not offended at all that some of those games that Michigan State's going to win. The other 4, Southern Indiana, Elkhorn State, Georgia Southern, Stony Brook. You're going to have 4 games like that, whether you like it or not. You need that. You're going to need those guys for Jace Richardson to come in and play, for Zapala to come in and figure out where he is in the rotation. You need those games. And when you're playing 20 Big Ten games, there's not a lot of those. And those come and go. There's 1 or 2 in December. There's 1 and 2 in November, and you don't have any more left because you have those stupid Big Ten games the first week of December. 20 Big Ten games, that does nobody any favors. Because those television contracts, they don't make much money out of those Big Ten basketball games. They're just making it hard on the Big Ten basketball programs to play 20 conference games, creating this accordion effect where you have conference games spilling over into the first week of December when you should be playing Alcorn State a couple of times to get players for player development reasons. 20 Big Ten games, you got 11 others. And if you're Michigan State and you got 3 in the Maui and you have Kansas and then 1 in the Gavitt games, that's 5. You got 6 other games to work with. Good luck. So you're asking me who else is on the schedule. I'm saying don't hold your breath. It's not like in the old days when instead of having 4 challenging non-conference games, you might have 6 or 7. Why? Because you only had 16 Big Ten games. You had more room, but because you have like stupid Big Ten games, you're losing those non-conference games that have more flavor. That's how I feel about that. Let's go over here to the comments section. David Kapolka is checking in from Anaheim, California. James Bannon in the house. Glad to be getting up-to-date information. How do you see the MSU and CMU Connor Stallion situation working out? A lot of people asking about that. Let me go down here to the bottom, make sure there's no funny business going on. Looks like some discussions. Having your own discussions, which is healthy. Where did I'm trying to find where I left off. Here it is. Matthew Johnson tuning in from Ravenna, Michigan while enjoying the NHL playoffs. NHL is at conference finals game 1 tonight. Rangers. If it's Rangers Oilers in the finals, that'd be good. If you got Connor McDavid playing 4 games at Madison Square Garden, that'd be good for the sport. Good for him. He's barely squeaked by the Canucks. That was a good series. Oilers remind me a little bit of the early Yzerman Red Wings teams that had some star power but didn't have the toughness to go far in the playoffs. Eventually, they got it figured out. Yzerman was great, but McDavid's a little better, of course. Don't mean to offend anybody. Shaughnessy says, gather around, gather around, gather around. John Schick says, give a thumbs up to Jim. Thanks. James Bannon says, hit the like button. Thanks. Shaughnessy says, it's been so effing long since the last live. I appreciate your frustration. Thank you. Mike Stefani says, what's up, Jim? He says, glad to have SpartanMag Live back. Mike from Macomb, but checking in from Grand Rapids. The Keys to Wisdom says, Child's baby back ribs. I don't know what that means, but whatever. James Bannon says, what type of fishing do you do in Oregon? We went fly fishing on the Deschutes River. We floated it. It was nice. Now, my friend, Kid Fantastic, has been doing more fly fishing out there in the meantime. So I suspect he might just take us to some of his personal favorite places. Or maybe we float it again. Comes with a price, though. Man, we were on the river, and we're waiting, and the guide is telling me, just fish right here at this spot, but don't go any further because it drops off. All right. And then there's some bananas coming down on a raft, and I'm looking, and they're coming right toward me. And I don't want to get out of their way because could drop off. And I'm thinking, do I go under and let them go over me? I'm like, this is dangerous, I think. And as it turns out, they kind of ended up, I think I might have been telling him, go that way. I can't remember if they steered that way or if the current took them that way. But as it turns out, they went by me. And I was like, I'm glad I survived that one. Got a couple of rainbow trout while we were out there. And what was the other one? Got a few of those. Rocky Mountain, not Rocky Mountain oysters. Rocky Mountain, not a cutthroat. I've forgotten it already. I'd remember. It'd come to me, but you don't want to hear that. But anyway, that's what we did out there, and that was good. Thomas Camp says, what's up, brother? Gross Pointer here. Could you explain a little bit of what's going on with CMU Connor Stallion situation? Everybody's asking about that. As far as I know, unless I missed something, I've not heard any movement on that. But a lot of that, all of a sudden, that's come back to the surface. I'm not sure. The Keys to Wisdom says, gotta be some salmon running in the rivers off Oregon. The Keys to Wisdom says, I'm not thrilled about these new West Coast schools. It's more like the Big Ten dying than gaining to me. I agree with you on that. It doesn't feel like the Big Ten anymore. And nothing against Oregon and Washington and USC and UCLA, but it's just not the Midwestern Big Ten Conference anymore. I mean, you might as well call it the AFC North or something. You might as well call it the AFC. You might as well call the conference Fox Sports Conference, because the Big Ten part of it that's kind of the nucleus, but it's 18 teams. It's It's not the same flavor. And as they keep adding more and more, and the ACC is going to blow up and disintegrate, and the Big Ten is going to get a couple teams, SEC is going to get a couple teams, and a few more go to the Big 12, and you end up with 3 super conferences or whatever. Eventually, it's going to be 2, and it's not going to be. And then they'll probably divide them up into divisions. I don't know, but the Big Ten schools that had a lot in common geographically, culturally, academically. And no, it's just the Fox Football Conference now. It's just going to get bigger. And, it used to be special to be part of the Big Ten. Now it still kind of is because you're one of the halves, I guess. But there's nothing special about it because it's homogenized and whatever. Do I sound like the old guy yelling at the clouds at things I can't control? Back in my day, it was a lot better. We had 3 channels. Howard Cosell came on and they played Battle of the Network Stars and we liked it. No, that was not better back then. Some things were better. Anyway, if you're 47 or older, you understood what I just talked about. If you're younger than that, you have no idea what I was talking about, but you probably laughed a little bit about the Battle of the Network Stars. Spunky181 just got here. The Keys to Wisdom says, I'd even prefer to rewind to 12 and not have Maryland and Rutgers in the conference. Spunky181 says, yeah, those Friday games suck in November. Spunky181 says, screw Central Michigan. Done with them. Don't give them any money till they fire the head coach. Is it the head coach or also, what about the athletic director? Why does it take 6 months to investigate this? What's going on there? Lee Gauss says, take the devil's money, pay the devil's price. J.R. Jr. says, you got Michigan fans out there still living in their delusional separate reality where the cheating scandal is just cope by the rivals. I don't know if I read that right or not. I don't have my glasses on. I might have read that incorrectly. I don't know. Keys to Wisdom says, I've always liked Michigan State scheduling the 3 in-state MAC schools. Think we should keep supporting them with games even with this situation. J.J. McKay from the Upper Peninsula says, yay, Comp is back. Yay, I'm glad that J.J. McKay is back from the Keweenaw. J.R. Jr. says, I'd be willing to forgive CMU if they had even addressed it at this point. Instead, they've gone radio silent at the suggestion of Michigan lawyers. I don't know that to be true, but there's something going on. Spunky181 says, playing Central Michigan is a no-win situation. Play a different team. Yumalog says, will we get our Labor Day Friday game? In that interview, the Graham Crouch article, again, Graham Crouch, really good article stemming from an interview with Alan Haller. Haller said, he said there's not going to. See, now I've already forgotten. He said that the Ford Field thing's not going to happen this year. Or they strongly insinuated that. Did they also insinuate that there's not going to be a Friday night game this year? I got to read it again. I came away thinking that it's going to stay a Saturday game. So my brain sucks. So I can't tell you definitively that it's a no. And I've texted Alan Haller about this, but I didn't hear back from him. Come on, Alan. Give me a text. Let me know what's going on. But he gives me information when he can. So sometimes maybe he just can't, and I understand that too. So I'm just joking. All right. So J.J. McKay says CMU can go pound sand. Cancel those games, he says. John Coonan says CMU boo, replaced with Ferris State. Now that's a joke. You can't play Ferris State, but I respect Ferris State. I like Central too, man. I like their little, the football program. People up there get excited about it. The attendance is kind of leveled off, and it's too bad. I like MAC football, which is kind of hard. It's kind of hard for them to find a place at the table with their the available number of people. You would think that Western would be able to draw a little bit more with just, more of the West Michigan, Grand Rapids, Kalamazoo thing there. But it's just so hard to go against Michigan and Michigan State on those Saturdays. But I like the MAC. Tim D says, play University of Windsor, pay them half. That's still a lot of Canadian money. Tim D being funny. I like that little stadium they have over there in Windsor. One time I was driving through there and they were playing. I think it was Labor Day, because Labor Day's might have been Labor Day. Labor Day's a big football weekend in Canada. The CFL has big Labor Day games. It's kind of like their Thanksgiving. I know they've got a different Canadian Thanksgiving, but Labor Day is a football thing for them. Because CFL, it's usually like week 5 or 6 for them because they start early. I was driving by that stadium and there was a game going on. I think it was Labor Day. Windsor was playing Guelph or something like that. I'm like, I'm going to watch this for a few minutes. I got in there. And the thing the thing that strikes you is, they're a yard away. They're playing CFL rules as Canadian college football. So you can't just, your nose guard can't get on, can't go head to head with your center and just be like 6 inches from them. They have to have, there's a yard neutral zone, which is a little different. And of course you have 12 people and there's no illegal motion, and the end zones are 20 yards long. But the thing that really stands out is when there's a penalty and they throw those orange penalty flags, and they just they're just brilliant. Those red, orange penalty flags stick out more than the yellow ones for some reason. They explode into the air like fireworks. Anyway, I think I got a coffee and watched it a little bit, and then I left. But it's a nice little stadium. One year they also had the Canadian Olympic track and field trials there, and I pulled over and watched a little bit of that too. One time the USA rugby team played the Canadian rugby team there, and I didn't go to that. I wanted to, but I didn't go there. But it's a cool little stadium. It doesn't seat many people, but it's all right. It's right. You come over you guys know, you if you've been there, you come over Ambassador Bridge and you head down whatever street that is coming out of there, and it's right there on the left. Can't miss it. Every time I go by there, I look to see what's going on in there, which is often. The Keys to Wisdom says, same with basketball, the LCA or before at the Palace, way different portion of the fans. I think you're talking about, the Detroit area Michigan State fans that maybe don't get to East Lansing a lot, but when Michigan State goes to them, they come out and watch it. There really is something to that, because people just get out of the habit of going all the way to East Lansing to watch games. So if you go to them, they show up, and it works. It's a thing. What we got here? JR Jr. says, I don't know, the Week 12 game of 2021 was magical and could never happen indoors. Maybe fewer tickets sold, but a much more majestic aesthetic. I agree with JR Jr. about that. He's talking about 2021. Michigan State had a great season, and I'm going to the Peach Bowl. Mel Tucker's second year. Beat a good Penn State game, snow globe game, snow at Spartan Stadium like we've never seen before, and that was great. And you're exactly right. If they played that game at Ford Field every single year, that would never happen again. I would say this. There's a decent chance that you can have a game like that 7 days earlier in Week 11 at a home game. That was kind of freakish snow Thanksgiving weekend. And of course, there's a better chance you have 7 days better of a chance 7 days later into the winter to get snow on Thanksgiving weekend than you would the weekend before. My point is, I'm not saying you play in the Dome all year in November, just Week 12. And if you're at home on Week 11, you might have a snow globe game. I hear what you're saying, and you're right. If there had not been snow, if that had been at Ford Field, we would have never had that happen, and that was a special game. That was great. That game in 30-degree temperatures with all that snow is better than, 40 and raining. But you make a good point. John Coonan says Ford Field experience was top-notch. The Keys to Wisdom says, I think Oakland got a donation a long time back that had a stipulation preventing them from ever having football. I didn't know that. Spunky181 says Ford Field was fun besides the product on the field. I agree. JJ McKay says giving up home games is dumb. But JJ McKay, he's got a German Shepherd. He's a tough guy. He's up in the Keweenaw. He goes snowshoeing to buy groceries. So I understand. He's a hardy individual, and he don't want to give up any home games. He doesn't care if it's 20 below. I respect that. Spunky181 says play Hawaii at home only. Whitey Sparty says move late season games to West Coast. Now you guys are just being silly. All right, let's go back to the mailbag. Question 9, Matt from 2 West Holden Hall, 1989 and 90. I like Matt from 2 West Holden Hall. I'm a Holden lifer myself. Good to have you out there. Matt says, your guess on the basketball assistant vacancy. I mentioned Sadie Washington earlier. Question 10, Muddy 32 from Northville, Michigan. He's not actually from Northville, but I'm assigning him a town. He says, how do you see the starting secondary come opening day? Starting secondary, I think Chance Rucker at corner. Dylan Tatum and Spencer are your safeties. The other corner could be Charles Brantley, could be Ed Woods. I've not looked at Ed Woods' film yet. 2-year starter at Arizona State. Woods or Brantley along with Rucker. I'm going to table that for a while, and I'll give you a clearer answer later in the summer. Question 11, R. Kruger 05 from Charlotte, North Carolina says, what's the latest on Michigan State's NIL programs? Well, the latest is they continue to talk about it. And Haller said that they've massaged a lot of different ideas, different models, depending on what the future is going to look like. And the future is going to change on Thursday when the NCAA decides what's going to happen with this House versus NCAA settlement and what the stipulations are going to be for member institutions. So things could change here soon. In the meantime, Michigan State is, I've heard some things. They're making progress in the NIL situation. The NIL situation is okay right now, but it's got a chance to be a plus in the future, and they're still getting it situated and structured. Now, why did it suck so bad last year? Well, you had people that are from outside the athletic department running the thing, and they screwed it up because the athletic department could not run it. Those were the rules at that time. And then the NCAA tried to penalize Tennessee a couple of months ago for running an NIL, and they lost that lawsuit, and that changed the rules in February. Now it's okay for colleges to run their NILs, which is probably the good, safe way to do it. You know, you're seeing this mess that they've got at Florida right now with that quarterback who was promised $12 million or whatever it was. That's because you got people, people shouldn't be, they got people doing these things that shouldn't be doing these things. That's what happened last year when Michigan State lost players right before the Iowa game. So that's all been changed. Now Michigan State is moving into the next iterations of NIL landscaping. And, you know, I'm hearing that there were talks last week. There's been talks, and I think it's going to get ironed out positively. Alan Haller's on it. Other people are on it. Garrett Brenningstool's involved as they revamp things. And I'll keep my ear to the ground on that. But you're asking what's the latest? The latest is they're working on it. And everybody's working on it. But others have been, whereas Michigan State was spinning its wheels with SDFL last year, there are some schools that seem to have gained more traction and hit the ground running a little bit better. I mean, we see Oregon doing good things. Missouri is kind of punching above their weight a little bit. Miami keeps throwing money all over the place. So we'll see where it all settles out. But Michigan State's not going to be the New York Yankees of NIL, but they're not going to get trounced in it either. But they're still working to get the car back on the track. Question 12, Napoleon from Idaho says, do the chickens have large talons? I don't know what that means. I might have just said something very embarrassing, but I don't even know what the joke is. Question 13, Spartan Fan 81 from Orange County, California says, any new transfers you can break down film about on the show? I can tell you that's on my things to do list. Some of those players we mentioned a moment ago, I got to take a closer look at. But at this point, no. I said weeks ago that I was impressed with the way Luke Newman looked, and he was coming in from the winter portal. But I got to take a look at Woods over there at Arizona State. I got to look at these defensive tackles. I want to take another closer look at that Oregon spring game to look at Roberts and some of these guys. So right now, no, I don't, but that's going to be coming in the future. Molalabe 88 from Gladwin, Michigan says, which unit has been the biggest gainer or loser from the transfer portal? What's your opinion on the defensive tackle by committee approach this season versus paying more for a dude or two in the portal? Things for all you do. The biggest losing area, like I mentioned earlier, is the offensive line. When you lose Vandermark at the very end of the spring, that wasn't nice. Bringing in Tanner Miller on the offensive line, Luke Newman, and A.J. Dennis coming in from Illinois. A.J. Dennis just went through spring. He's still just a mid-year enrollee, so he's just getting started. So it's kind of like you're adding him to last year's recruiting class. That guy's got some athleticism. I've mentioned this before, but they're one of the only teams I've ever seen where they threw a jailbreak screen with the offensive tackle getting out as a lead blocker. I know it's just high school, but I'm like, that's an offensive tackle getting out. There's a lead blocker they're throwing a jailbreak screen to the one receiver side. He's got some athletic ability. He's still a puppy. But you also asked the big scanner, what's your opinion on the defensive tackle by committee approach this season versus paying more for a guy or two in the portal? Like I said, down the road, if you've got a guy like Derek Harmon and you're closer to breaking through and maybe competing for a Big Ten title or something, I think Michigan State's going to be in position to fend off all comers and retain someone like that. Right now, as they're planting the seeds and the foundational layers of low ego, high output, some players got away. And they're okay. They're going to plan their work and work their plan. but I don't think that's a long-term philosophy. As for this year, losing those two players I thought was going to leave a mark. And the fact that they went out and got Ben Roberts, solid. You'd rather have Harmon and Barrow. Barrow, he's played a lot of snaps, and I wonder about how much tread he has left on his tire. I think Harmon is good, but is there a chance? I liked Simeon Barrow a lot when he was younger. And, even after year one when he played a lot, I think it was his redshirt year. This kid from Georgia that was underrated and all of a sudden comes in and more than held his own. That's when the transfer portal was just beginning. And I remember telling Paul Konadike and some other guys, I'm like, man, Michigan State's going to have a hard time holding on to him. Going to have a really hard time holding on to him. SEC teams are going to be all over him. Frankly, I'm surprised he played 2 more years at Michigan State. I'm surprised SEC schools didn't come in and poach him earlier. That being said, the last 2 years, Michigan State was rotating basically 3 defensive tackles, Hanson, Barrow, and Harmon. And those 3 guys played more snaps than they should have. And they ended up conserving themselves and playing hurt and playing dinged up. And it wasn't good. Maybe that's a reason the Barrow kind of petered out. And he was kind of, he had a lot of wear on his tires. So then he misses the spring. So how much does he have left in the tank? I don't know. I'm not saying it's a trade situation, but if you trade Simeon Barrow and you lose his last year and you get 3 years out of Ben Roberts, I think I'd make that trade. Again, I need to watch Ben Roberts a little bit more, but as I look at it right now, I think I would take 3 years from Ben Roberts right now, more so than 1 year of Simeon Barrow. Don't hold me to that. I might change my mind by July, but that's the way I look at it right now. I know it's not an actual trade, but I think that's okay. Now, you still lose Harmon. Now, that hurts. That hurts your chances of having a good, solid... It decreases your chance of having a surprisingly good season. He's a good player, but I think Dowse is solid. I think Roberts is solid. So we'll see what happens there. So what's my opinion on defensive tackle by committee approach? I think that there's a shortage of defensive tackles. I refer to defensive tackles as rare earth commodities. There's not many defensive tackles on the face of the earth. And when you see one at Detroit Loyola who's 6'4", 330, and he had some bad weight on him, but he had twinkle toes quickness and some physicality and some nastiness, some force to him. And why people were ranking him outside of the top 30 in the state of Michigan when that's a rare earth commodity. SpartanMag was saying that dude is, forget about where other people have him ranked, that's a rare earth commodity. And now you see why. Goes into the portal and a lot of schools want him, and Oregon paid a lot of money to get him. You heard what Brian Kelly said. They wanted defensive tackles at LSU. They said they needed them. Other SEC teams needed them. And there's a shortage of them. There's a finite number of defensive tackles. That's why they're valuable. That's why they should be ranked higher. When you find guys that are jumbo size with some ability. Even if they're reaches to an extent in terms of, it could be a project. They're still rare earth commodities. Brian Kelly said, "Hey, we're LSU. We need defensive tackles, and their defense was terrible last year, and they didn't sign any defensive tackles." And he said, "Hey, we're not going to go out and buy players." Wait a minute, everybody's buying players. That's not like a holier than thou South Bend, Indiana, Notre Dame sermon material at this point. Everybody's buying players. That's what you have to do. For the first time I can ever remember, it sounded to me like LSU couldn't bid with the bidders. Back in the old days, back when it was illegal to buy players, there were some teams that were doing it more than others. And now the tide has risen, and those schools that used to be pretty good with the bags aren't so special now. LSU always has a lot of good talent, a lot of great fans, rabid fans, sometimes to the point of being self-destructive. Great recruiting talent base. But some of these programs, LSU, in the past, when some of these programs they weren't getting as much competition in the spending areas. Now could be a little more difficult. LSU. Kentucky, Alabama. Did I say that? Sorry. All right. Anyway, so I don't know. LSU all of a sudden is not. I don't know. I'm gonna get in trouble. I don't know. Just allegedly. Well, shoot. What did what did Jimbo Fisher say? Had that big crap fit about Saban the one time. It's not like, anyway. Mulalabe 88 from Gladwin, Michigan says, which unit has been the biggest gainer or loser for the transfer portal? It's I'm not gonna. I was gonna say something else, but I'm not. Maybe some other time. I already answered. I already got into that question. Question 15, Ronnie 68 from Cincinnati says, Jim, with NIL in the portal, do you see any loss of interest from fans in terms of following recruiting? He says, I used to really enjoy the process and following the recruits' progress. Now it kind of seems like, what's the point? They leave after a year and anyway, and the roster is so fluid. Yeah, you're right. The recruiting thing is different, and I think there is a little less interest in that. It's still important because that's kind of your baseline talent line, and the way Smith wants to do it is he wants to get OKGs, our kind of guy, low ego, high output, bring them in, develop them, have them fall in love with the program, and then pay them later as they earn their keep, because sooner or later NIL is going to come up. So they're going with a certain mindset on all of that. So if you can evaluate really well at the 3-star level with some 4-stars in there, they still see that as the lifeblood. That's not the only lifeblood. The transfer portal is going to be part of it all also anyway, but it's not going to be as big of a part as we saw this year. When you have a coaching change, X number of players are leaving because of the coaching change, and there's X number of players leaving because the current staff didn't recruit those guys, and you know what? We need others. Then you're bringing in 41 guys because it's a new staff and you need new players. It's not going to be like that every year. It's going to settle down a little bit, more than a little bit. That being said, you're right. The recruiting thing, there's interest has gone down, but it's been replaced by interest in the portal. Now, a lot of people were doing a lot of hand-wringing about the portal, didn't like it, but you're still, if you're a Michigan State fan, if you're a Purdue fan, if you're an Iowa fan, if you're an Ohio State fan, you're still interested in that because the portal affects your roster. It affected Michigan State's roster a ton this year. It's not always going to be like that. But you may remember, if you followed recruiting a lot, the month of April, the month of May used to be big recruiting months. And there used to be a lot of commitments in April. And invariably, there'd be Michigan State fans on the Underground Bunker. They'd be wringing their hands about Michigan State losing on commitments in April. What's going on? We're losing these recruits. Michigan's getting this guy. They're getting this guy. We lost these recruits. Think about that. In the past, there was a lot of hand-wringing in April and into May when Michigan State was losing recruiting battles. That was replaced this year by the portal. The May evaluation period is still going on football recruiting-wise, and now official visits are a big part of June. And Jason Kellop had a great story at SpartanMag.com about some of the visitors that are going to be coming in the next couple weeks. A lot of 3-star guys, a lot of evaluation guys, a lot of developmental guys. And that's still going to be an important layer of roster building, and then you retain them later. Portal's still going to be part of the spring. But as time goes on, recruiting is still going to, I think it's still going to be an important part of this if you're a fan, and definitely as they're building a program. I will say this, the money that recruits used to get on the black market, it's still going on a little bit. I mean, it's legal now, and there's NIL money for recruits now. But recruits 2 years ago, like Samson Okunlola, the offensive lineman from Massachusetts, the Michigan State recruiter that ended up going to Miami, he commanded a lot of money to go there. You're going to see now, recruits, not that we always knew how much money they were making anyway, but you're going to see recruits, more money is going to be going to NIL money than it will be to recruits. A good 4-star linebacker these days is not going to get nearly as much money as he would have gotten 3 years ago, if that makes sense. So recruiting, for the reasons you mentioned, the money's going to go to more proven players rather than developmental players that might be leaving later anyway. I mean, Michigan State, it's no secret, Michigan State paid a good chunk of money to get By Job, a good chunk of money to get Sam Levitt. Throwing money at 4-star recruits, that money's going to go down. So making decisions on those, that's all part of putting a roster together. And The decision making, the evaluation, roster analysis, roster construction, these are all inexact sciences, and some programs are going to emerge doing it better than others. It's going to be fascinating to watch it, whether you like the new system or not. But you're right, recruiting is not quite what it used to be, but it's still important. And now the portal thing is the other prong of it. So the combination of recruiting plus portal, it all adds up, in my opinion, to about the same level of importance. Now, whether or not there's as much fan interest remains to be seen. Shilla1 from Detroit says, Jim, what is your read on the quarterback situation at Michigan State? And do you see it being improved over last year? Yes, it'll be improved over last year, because last year Michigan State had maybe the second worst quarterback situation in the Big Ten. Better only than Iowa, because Iowa had the injury. So yeah, it's not going to be worse. But Childs, all right, the Shilla from Detroit says, I think Childs has a very high ceiling, but he is also very young, starting as a true sophomore, and his receiving core is not deep. Curious as to your thoughts on him after seeing him in the spring. That's the whole question. Childs, high ceiling, I agree, all kinds of talent. He has that it factor as a leader, seems to. That mobility is excellent to go with that arm strength. So he's got to learn to make reads. He's got to get on the same page with his receivers. His spring scrimmage performance was okay, shined a few times, but overall the defense, I think, was a little ahead of the offense in a lot of ways. So he's got to get on the same page with those receivers and get those things ironed out. I had like 3 Oregon State games on my DVR, maybe more than that. I went back and was able to save some, like when they played UC Davis and Stanford when he got a lot of playing time, and now those are no longer on my DVR, and I got really mad about that a couple weeks ago. So, I want to go back and see his incompletions. I don't want to just see highlights of completions. I want to see a whole game. I know he only might attempt 2 or 3 passes in a game, and some games he might attempt 7 or 8 or 10 passes. I want to see all the incompletions. His completion percentage was real strong in the 70s and so forth. That being said, you're exactly right. He's still just a true freshman. He played last fall, so he's a rising sophomore. But he's got some learning to do in terms of making those reads. And I don't know for sure that that's going to be great, but I think it will be in time. It'll be good. And he certainly has excellent tools. So we'll have to wait and see how it comes around. Better than last year, yes. What do I think coming out of the spring? Still has work to do. He's a young talent that still needs to improve. Question 18, Pierre St. Pierre from Seattle says, looking at the roster after the dust has settled, I find myself optimistic about the future. He says, I like the secondary. I love the linebackers, and I think we all know that defensive tackles are going to be a gap for a couple of years until some bodies can get up to speed. He says, is a functional Michigan State good enough to make a bowl game in 2024? He's asking, meaning, can we run the ball well enough to not lose games in the first quarter the way we have for the last 2 seasons? Or should I save my time and plan to pick weeds on Saturdays instead? Pierre St. Pierre asking if he should just pick weeds rather than watch football. Now, Pierre St. Pierre from Seattle, I have a feeling no matter what the team looks like, you're going to be watching and you're not going to be picking weeds on Saturday. I understand your frustration and you want the team to be good and all those things, but I have a feeling you're going to be watching no matter what because you're a Spartan and there's nothing you can do about it. So this team, first of all, he says, meaning, can we run the ball well enough to not lose games in the first quarter the way we have the last 2 seasons? First of all, I don't know that to be true. Being unable to run the ball, it seems like they've lost games more in the fourth quarter. They lost games in all quarters, I guess, in the last couple of years. But not being able to run the ball. I don't know what the run game is going to look like as an offensive line. I'm not sure. I mean, the offensive line coach is excellent, and I think the scheme is good. And I think that there's been like a retro Back to the Future trend going on in college football a little bit. I realize there's some teams that are still throwing it around and going up tempo and RPOing all over the place like Ole Miss and some other places. But I think what they did at Oregon State last year and the year before, those 2 seasons were a little bit different. But the physicality and the play action and the counter boot drags and overs, the tight end, the ball control passing, but also the way the routes are run and the timing, that the way they break out at the top of the routes, the way that's all coordinated. they huddle and they're under center and they might be running zone and it might look like something from 1978, but there's other components to it. And I think it's similar. It's a mindset with some sophisticated intricacies woven into it, horizontally and vertically. And like people say, make you to defend the whole part of the field. You hear that about Oregon State. In terms of those intricacies and the sophistication with the physicality, the mindset is similar to Harbaugh football. It's similar. Harbaugh would run it, but they had some other things that it was hard to keep them from moving the chains. Now they had a ton of NFL talent. Michigan State's not there yet, but Michigan won a national title doing it that way. And just 4 years earlier, they were really getting ripped by media for having an outdated, antique offense. Remember when even Michigan writers were saying that about Michigan when they were losing games in 2020 during the COVID year. Then they went speed and space for a while. That didn't work out very well. And then when Harbaugh was on the verge of getting fired, he went back to I'm going to do it my way, more of the way he did it at Stanford. If he's going to go out, he's going to do it. He's never said that publicly, but that's what it looked like to me. And he got it done and got it established. Now, was there some funny business going on as well? Yes, there was. I think that's pretty much, it's not allegations. I mean, it happened, right? Is it allegations or did they fire people for no reason on the staff or whatever? And was he suspended for no reason at the end of the year? I don't know. Allegations or whatever. I mean, I go back to the Michigan State game in Ann Arbor 2 years ago. That turned out to be the tunnel fight game? I mean, Michigan State looked good in the first half. Keon Coleman was having a dominant first half. He was very good. Went into halftime. That game was, 14-10? Michigan State, where they stopped in fourth down by the goal line? I can't remember. But that game was competitive in the first half. Second half, Peyton Thorne said, man, those guys just knew where we were going with the ball. Did they? I don't know. Second half was different. Sometimes football games are different in the second half, yeah, right? But that one, I mean, Connor Stallions was at the Central Michigan game for a reason. I mean, they respected what Michigan State was capable of doing, even though Michigan State's season eventually went off the deep end. Michigan, thought they needed extra help. I think that's going to be proven soon, right? That's still an allegation? I don't know. I don't know what to call it. Anyway, how did I start talking about that? Looking back at the question, I don't know why I started talking about that. Oh, about Michigan State's style of play. So I think it's I don't know if they're going to be as physical as they need to be for the whole operation to work well. I don't know if Childs is going to be as experienced as he needs to be to make the whole thing work well. But seeds are being planted, and in time, I think the outfit could be pretty good. And I've mentioned this before. Demetrius Martin had a really interesting quote. I mentioned this in the VCast after the spring game. I thought it was the best quote of the entire spring when Demetrius Martin was talking about, hey, I used to be a defensive backs coach at various places in the Pac-12, and every time we played Oregon State, it was a pain in the rear to get ready for what they did on offense because they made you defend every blade of grass. Words to that effect. I'd like to dive into that a little bit more with him. But everybody knows I love huddles. I love the fullback. I like the run game. I like all of it. But if a team can win with old-fashioned football, I kind of appreciate that. And I think that we're seeing it turn back to that type of football with some people. That's one of the great things about college football. There's different ways to attack it. There's different flavors, different ways to do it. The way Iowa is doing it, it doesn't quite have, I mean, they try to win with some physicality and all those things, but those guys have forgotten more about football than I'll ever know. But the level of sophistication and the way they can get you leaning one way and hit you the other way, the way Michigan did it last year, the way Oregon State's done it the last couple of years, it's a different level than what Iowa was trying to do. All right, so question 19, backup long snapper from Ferndale, Michigan says, with only a few scholarships remaining in Michigan and Michigan State needing help at wide receiver, offensive line, and defensive line, do you think Michigan State can find an impact player at wide receiver in the portal? No, I think Michigan State's done in the portal. I've got that from a good source. They looked at wide receiver, didn't quite have anyone that flew their kite, like I said earlier, and especially with hurricane warning prices going on. That's another Andy Staplesism. Good podcast, and he hits the nail right on the head with some of these things, and he makes the point that we're seeing the same thing from coaches and on the recruiting trail as well, that the prices were really high in the NIL in the spring, and you would have to overpay for a second string wide receiver. Someone like Alante Brown this year in the spring would have run you more money than it's worth. So if you're in the process of trying to establish a low ego, high output locker room and change the culture, you don't want to bring in, Jarek Broussard for what they paid him 2 years ago. All right, question number 20. Mike from Macomb, Michigan says, do you expect that Friday night game versus Purdue will be played at Ford Field? I live in Metro Detroit, so I'm hoping it will be, as I had a blast downtown last year for the Penn State game. Good question, but no, I think it's going to be a home game. I've not heard anything about moving that one to Ford Field. I don't even know if it's open that weekend. I don't know if the Lions are playing or not. I guess Friday it wouldn't matter anyway. But no, I've not heard that. And again, I would like the idea of moving the Rutgers game to Ford Field, and I don't like the idea of the Purdue game being a Friday night, but these are done by the networks. So that's that. That's the name of that tune. Let's go over here to the comments and reactions, and we'll sign off here pretty soon. Lee Gauss says Ford Field last game is a good move. Has to be a Friday, so not to cause high school playoffs on Sunday. That's a good point. You can have, because high school playoffs on a Sunday is a problem for some schools. But yeah, the Ford Field game, the last game of the year, has to be a Friday. If you're going to play the last game of the year at Ford Field, I agree. It needs to be Black Friday night, not on Saturday. Ford Field, Black Friday. That's when people need something to do, is Black Friday night. Perfect scenario. I agree. It needs to be on Friday. JJ McKay says, put thermals on and quit being pansies. Except he didn't say pansies. But JJ McKay, he's a youper. He's no good. I understand. JJ McKay says they should boot his ass as he doesn't play here anymore. I don't know who he's talking about there, but JJ McKay didn't get enough ice fishing in this winter, so you have to have patience with him. It's fine. JR Jr. says, I don't understand how to reconcile the sentiment of wanting to graduate from Michigan State, but also being so offended that you have to enter the portal. I hear what you're saying. There's a little more to it, but I don't want to get into that. But yeah, I'm not gonna. You're right. It doesn't quite add up. I could throw something in there that would make it add up, but that's kind of in confidence a little bit. The Keys to Wisdom says, if you are close to graduation somewhere and can accomplish it quickly, who wouldn't do that? The Keys to Wisdom says, I hate this money crap in college and all the transferring game is going down the crapper. Jason G says, nobody gives an F about scum and their 3+ years of cheating to win anything. More MSU football. JJ McKay says, yep, Keys, I agree. Mike Stefani says, great news regarding Saudi and Michigan State. Now, it's not official news yet, but that's the way it's looking. The Keys to Wisdom says, expansion crap is terrible as well. I think Keys to Wisdom has posted enough. Appreciate the post. Let's move on here. Whitey Sparty says, good, we really need a big man coach. All right. Jason G says, nobody gives an F about Michigan. The biggest slight is to not talk about them. Jake says, I miss old college football. Still looking at some posts here. There's a lot of them, so I'm just going to skim through them. Appreciate people taking time to post. And Great Lakes Surfers Journal says, yo, I appreciate Great Lakes Surfers Journal. My kind of guy. The best surfing in the Great Lakes, from what I understand, is in November, right? When the gales of November start coming in. Have you ever done any surfing behind the freighters on the Great Lakes? I'm wondering. I'll give you a little Lake Michigan there. as we get ready to sign off. Number 6, K9 made that season feel cheap. Great Lake Surfers Journal checking in from Ann Arbor. Looks like you guys talking about K9 and Lorenzo White. JJ McKay says, for sure was awesome watching K9 like back in 87 watching Lorenzo White. Let's see. A lot of people. What do we have here? Great Lake Surfers Journal says, bro, we win in more than 4.5 games. Spunky181 says, can't wait for a playoff game in Spartan Stadium, laughing out loud. Think that'll ever happen? It'll happen someday, right? Can you imagine? December game in Spartan Stadium, playoff. It's going to happen somewhere in the Big Ten. Doors Fan 91 says, hey, Comp, if Okemos plays my high school in regionals, I might come up to watch. Sounds good. Let me know if you're coming up. Are you Northville or Battle Creek Lakeview? Okemos was in the regionals last year and lost to Battle Creek Lakeview. Good team. So we'll see. It's tight. There's good players out there, good teams. 7-inning game. Run into a good pitcher. I mean, last year, the top-ranked teams all went down in the same day, like Northville and was it Orchard Lake St. Mary's, some others. But there's some good teams out there. Our team, we swept Saline. Saline's really good. We swept them. Lost to Detroit Catholic Central this year. Beat them last year. Beat Orchard Lake St. Mary's this year. They're not as great as they were 2 years ago, but they're still very good. And a lot of those teams out there aren't really clear where Okemos is. But there's a lot of good teams out there. And, hey, DeWitt's good, man. It's hard. It's the teams that make it to the Final Four, I mean, credit to them. It's a lot of fun. Those guys work hard. It's really nice to see well-played baseball out there. Last night I was watching DeWitt and Okemos, and I was watching, I don't know, Portland and was it St. John's and some of the others at the Diamond Classic. And just, these young guys out there really executing with the big crowd and the lights and the music and the public address and the stadium atmosphere. It's pretty cool. It's a good thing. If you're sick of big money sports, go watch some high school baseball at some of these tournaments. It's good. At a venue like McLean Stadium, which at this time of year, that grass is immaculate. And the trees, of course, are all greenery now. The outfield trees in McLean Stadium with the lights. I tell you, I've not been to every ballpark in the world, but I mean, I don't know what's better. I mean, Wrigley Field, Fenway. Seriously, I'm serious about this. You would need to have something at the foot of the Rocky Mountains or maybe on the Pacific Ocean for my money to be as pretty as the Red Cedar River and the trees and the outfield out there with the lights. And the field is just beautiful. It's a beautiful place for baseball. I don't know what's better. I realize that it only seats, 4,000 or whatever, 3,000. I realize that there's other stadiums in the SEC and other places that seat 10,000 that are bigger. But in terms of just beauty, McLean Stadium at this time of year, now that the college season is over, unfortunately, but at this time of year, you get into May and June, it's gorgeous, especially for a night game. All right. You guys are talking about Keon Coleman. It looks like we're in. I'd like to entertain some of these, but we need to move on and shut it down. I appreciate that you guys had your own conversation here. I'd like to comment on it a little bit, but you guys are probably tired of me. We've had enough. All right, so we appreciate everybody that tuned in to watch SpartanMag Live tonight. It won't be 3.5 weeks off next time. I want to get into a little bit more of the spring game and some of the film. We'll run some of the film here, talk about some things. We'll take more questions as we go. There's no shortage of news in the college football world. Even though it's May, there's still news every single day, especially with the NCAA hearings, or the NCAA House versus NCAA, the settlement that they're going to come up with is going to change the direction of college sports. We'll have to wait and see what that means and what the statements are coming from different athletic directors and so forth. It's going to be plenty of news. A lot of recruits coming in to visit in early June, late May. Got some camps to cover, and there will be no shortage of things to talk about. Even though it's May, a lot of football going on. We'll be back soon to talk Spartan Mag Live. In the meantime, go to SpartanMag.com, become a subscriber. $1 gets you a month subscription, and we think that you'll like it. And we've got more coverage coming and more analysis of the roster going forward. We appreciate everybody showing up for Spartan Mag Live tonight. Appreciate the comments. Appreciate all of the questions over at the Underground Bunker message board, and we look forward to seeing you more over at the Underground Bunker message board and more comments from you as we move forward into the summer. It's going to be a big summer as Jonathan Smith continues to get the football program situated to his liking 6, 7, 8, 9 months into his tenure, heading toward his first season as the head coach at Michigan State University. Thanks to everybody for checking in. We'll see you next time. Go to SpartanMag.com, and we'll talk to you over there soon. Be good, everybody.